If you like the story, you can support the author on Patreon. Link is in the description.
Chapter 51, Overload. Thousand Winds Temple, second floor of the secret realm. The torchlight resembling fiery dandelions filled the entire domed circular room. The rust-colored steel body of the ruin hunter floated in midair. The tip of its lance-like right arm nearly touched Nolan and the others. It was a close call, thankfully. Fiskal patted the dust on her skirt. The pantyhose on her legs tore a large hole in the back, revealing fair soft skin, probably cut by the rocks on the ground. Her silky golden hair and the fair back revealed by the one-piece short dress had a bit of dust, but there were no other injuries. After all, she may look like a soft and gentle girl, but her physique was far from ordinary, not to mention the power of the artifact. As for Nolan, who had Fiskal's body to cushion him, getting injured was even more impossible. "Miss, are you all right?" Ounce hurriedly flew over, also not having expected a ruin hunter to suddenly appear. Fiskal put down her skirt, partially covering the tear in her pantyhose. She folded her arms and glanced at Nolan beside her. Facing Ounce, she spoke with quite some dignity. "Ahem, thanks to my attendant's timely protection, I am unharmed." "Thank you, Sir Nolan." As the princess's companion, Ounce was naturally extremely grateful. "Fiskal has developed good feelings towards you. Obtain 285 affection points. Current affection level, LV.4, 5/400. Although little Amy pretended to be aloof on the surface, she was quite thankful inside. Her favorability rose substantially, surpassing the other girls Nolan knew and reaching LV.4 first. Which meant that she considered Nolan to be a pretty close friend. "Well, it's only natural to protect Her Highness after all," Nolan said with a smile. Fiskal was very satisfied with Nolan's reply. She looked at the ruin hunter about to attack again and summoned a light purple longbow. Its overall design looked like a musical note, the bow's name, Skyward Harp. Then she angrily said, "Humph, never has anyone made me so disheveled before." "Ounce." "Yes, miss." Ounce flapped her night-colored wings to arrive right in front of the ruin hunter. His beak spat out clusters of electro balls rapidly bombarding the ruin hunter. Since the ruin hunter had yet to reveal its center core at this point, the continuous bolts only inflicted electro on it. The actual damage caused was not high. After all, it didn't have a health bar. The defense of its steel body was formidable. Even so, this successfully drew the ruin hunter's attention to Ounce. Its four arms, two with lances and two humanoid hands, reached out for Ounce while also thrusting a lance at him. However, Ounce skillfully dodged them. At this time Fiskal had also drawn Skyward Harp, charging an arrow with electro energy aimed at the ruin hunter's eye and firing. Like a purple meteor, unfortunately, without exposing the core of the ruin hunter, any attack had to face its steel body. So, the effectiveness of Fiskal's attack was not significant, more like a venting of frustration. "Humph!" Fiskal ceased her fruitless efforts. Meanwhile on the other side Bennett also imbued his single-handed sword with pyro and rushed up close to the ruin hunter, jumping up to slash it. Teyvat's 7 elements interacting with each other led to various elemental reactions. The reaction between pyro and electro was called overload, creating an explosive effect. The very instant Bennett's pyro sword and the electro collided, an overload reaction erupted, blasting the ruin hunter back half a step and slowing its motions significantly. It did have an impact. But Bennett himself got blown much further away. Fortunately, with his ample experience, Bennett adjusted his body in mid-air, allowing his feet to land first. The explosive force of the overload reaction was tremendous. Even after landing, Bennett slid back several meters with his shoes scraping the ground. Of course, most adventurers' shoes were durable enough. "It seems we're helpless against it for now. We need to wait for a chance when its core is exposed." Nolan also shot it with an armor-piercing arrow. Empowered by Silent Shadow, his arrow seemed to teleport, bypassing spatial distance and air resistance to abruptly impale the ruin hunter's hand joint and successfully jam it. Yet it had no effect. The ruin hunter lightly moved its steel hand and bent the steel arrow. This princess knows of these ruin machines. If we move away so it can't attack us, it will float up high and attack with missiles. That's when its core will be revealed. Fiskal said in a slightly rising tone. Well, that seems to be the case. Nolan also thought about the method of dealing with the ruin hunter in the game, and it was indeed almost the same, so, he continued suggestively, "I'll go with Bennett towards the Iron Gate, distancing ourselves from it, then have Ounce retreat." After confirming the plan, Nolan and Fiscal ran to the location where Bennett was. They briefly explained the plan, and the three of them ran to the iron gate at the entrance of the passage. They were at least several dozen meters away from the ruin hunter. The distance was sufficient. Ounce, come back. Using the elemental skill Nitrider, Fiscal directly summoned the Ounce who was skirmishing with the ruin hunter back to her side from afar. As expected, after suddenly losing its target, the ruin hunter began floating up, reaching near the ceiling before searching for its target again. It quickly discovered the three at the iron gate. The ruin hunter did not rush over. Instead it detached its forearms and reversed them, revealing dark muzzles like four unmanned drones encircling it. Here it comes. Nolan's gaze was fixed on the ruin hunter high in the air, nearly poking out of the fragmented dome. After separating its arms, the core within its body was exposed, the same dazzling yellow light as on ruin guards. At this moment, Electro still lingered on its body from Ounce's thunderbolts earlier. Hitting it with pyro would surely overload its core and shatter it. The opportunity was fleeting and couldn't wait for Bennett to imbue Nolan's arrows with pyro. This time he directly used a not-so-cheap pyro-imbued arrow, Fire-Quenched Arrow. The dark red arrowhead, crafted from a rare ore containing pyro elements, released a large amount of pyro elements upon friction with the air, enveloping the arrow. Like the sound of breaking glass, the ruin hunter's core was even more easily shattered by the triggered overload reaction before it could fire missiles, and it crashed down from the air. Bang! The steel body smashed into the rubble pile, kicking up huge clouds of dust. Defeated a powerful enemy, obtained 1088 Adventure Express. This ruin hunter provided far more experience than the previous ruin guards. The threat it posed to Nolan and the others was indeed worth the price. Right after the ruin hunter fell. Suddenly, a loud clanging came from behind the three. The iron gate used to seal off the only path here besides the damaged ceiling opened. Chapter 52, The Great Purging Thunder of Darkest Dreams and Mad Visions. Seeing the iron gate finally open, everyone breathed a slight sigh of relief. This ruin hunter posed a considerable threat to them. Before continuing their exploration, Nolan went to collect the dropped materials from the ruin hunter. To Nolan's surprise, this ruin hunter dropped Chaos Circuit, which were a bit more advanced than the Chaos devices dropped by the previous ruin guards. These were all very useful things, especially for enhancing weapons and such. Just look at that future traveler. When the dull blade is enhanced to the max, even facing Rhodia of Locke there's no problem. Nolan thought this to himself. Of course, no matter how enhanced, the dull blade was still fundamentally a one-star weapon. What allowed the traveler to directly face Rhodia despite using it was their own prowess. Therefore, compared to enhancing the novice transition weapon dull blade with materials, it was better to save up and get a higher star weapon when possible, for better cost-effectiveness. As for why the traveler kept using the dull blade, Nolan guessed it was simply being used to it and sentimental, plus they were so formidable, obtaining monster materials was easy, so enhancing it wasn't a heartache. After collecting the dropped materials, Nolan's team began exploring the unknown path. Looking in from the entrance, the passage was rectangular. Fiery light came from within, miniature pyro braziers burning with pyro element placed at intervals along both sides for illumination. These bonfires are something that can be encountered quite often on the way of adventurous exploration. Perhaps left by predecessors, or originally existent in the ruins' mystic realm. If extinguished, adding some firewood and reigniting with pyro could keep them burning for long periods. Sometimes, they could be part of a puzzle mechanism that needed solving. They were generally rare, and figuring them out required the adventurer's experience. Fiscal walked ahead, stepping with her beautifully patterned black short boots. Her golden hair slightly covered the fair back revealed by the short skirt. As the skirt's hem swayed with each step, the torn part of the pantyhose on her legs, caused by stones, was faintly visible. Thus, the revealed snowy white skin was tinged with a fiery red hue from the surrounding firelight. What's this? Fiscal halted and gently touched her left eye covered by the black eye mask, suddenly turning with hands on her hips and haughtily laughing. My great purging thunder of darkest dreams and mad visions has seen through the veils of destiny and located a treasure beyond compare. Great purging, what? Bennett was left scratching his head by her words. It's the great purging thunder of darkest dreams and mad visions. Fiscal first corrected Bennett's terminology, then puffed her cheeks with amph and folded her arms to express the princess's displeasure. Bennett didn't dare say he still couldn't remember it. Ounce dutifully paraphrased. The young miss says she sees a treasure chest up ahead. Treasure chest? Nolan was rather excited. If it contained a primogem, that would be a huge amount of EXP again. The treasure chest Fiscal discovered wasn't far, in between two small pyro braziers. It was a common wooden chest, lower in value than the exquisite ones. This treasure chest was not sealed by rune spells or anything like that, and could be opened directly. Although so, Nolan no longer held much hope for it containing a primogem. As expected, the chest Fiscal opened only had a pile of Mora coins and 2 1-star artifacts. It looks like a lot, but in reality, the total is only more than 3,000. One of the artifacts was of the Plume of Death type, and because it had not been strengthened, the power bonus was negligible. The other one, the Crown type, was the same as the previous one, providing a bonus to maximum HP. Since only one artifact of the same type could be equipped, and the bonuses were repeated, Fiscal had to put them away for now. The team continued to move forward, temporarily not encountering the luck of finding new treasure chests. Not long after, a horizontal passage appeared ahead of Nolan's team. They could go left or right. Bennett, which way do you think is better? Nolan looked at Bennett. The previous method of doing the opposite of Bennett's choice had proven quite effective. Although the process was unexpected, the results were safe and fruitful each time. Me again? With my luck, whatever way I choose will definitely be fraught with difficulties, right? Bennett was quite self-aware. Earlier, not taking the path he pointed to still mysteriously led here and encountered the dangerous ruin hunter. If they really took the way he chose, it would surely be even more dangerous. I believe Sir Nolan's intention is that we simply do the opposite of your choice. Ounce flapped his night wings and said so. Ah! Hearing Ounce's words, Bennett couldn't help feeling a little dejected, but had to admit he was right. Fiscal lightly laughed once, maintaining her royal dignity. After seriously considering based on his adventuring instincts, Bennett finally chose left. So everyone went right. While walking, they kept an eye out for possible traps. After some unknown amount of time, Nolan and others suddenly heard voices conversing up ahead. SHHH. Nolan made a shushing gesture. When unclear about the situation ahead, it was better to be cautious. If it was other adventurers, they could share intel. But if it was the treasure hoarders, a fight would be inevitable. The Thousand Wines Temple's secret realm was initially discovered by them, and it wasn't impossible for them to take advantage of the gap to sneak in. Fiscal and the others nodded. Ounce said in a softer tone. Young miss, do you want me to go scout it out? Fiscal had just been about to nod again but was stopped by Nolan. He whispered, though Ounce is not very noticeable, there's still a chance of discovery. I have an even better method. Oh. Ounce was rather surprised. Was there someone even more suited to scouting than him? Nolan smiled lightly and directly vanished before everyone's eyes. He had used the stealth assassination technique that he had gotten from the debt agent. Invisibility. Bennett widened his eyes but managed to hold back any exclamation in time. Fiscal's fair face also showed a surprised expression. She then used her hands to feel the original position of Nolan and said. To think even my great purging thunder of darkest dreams and mad visions cannot see through it. You must have grasped the deepest mysteries of the darkest night. Ahem, as expected of my indispensable mighty attendant. Oh my, Sir Nolan truly possesses formidable abilities. Ounce had thought his godly archery skills were already incredible. He didn't expect there would also be such invisibility arts. Nolan swatted away the soft fair hand pinching his cheek, causing the princess to softly exclaim ah. In his stealth state, he said in a low voice. I'll go scout ahead. You guys wait here for me to get back. Chapter 53, Abyss Mages. The stealth assassination technique allowed the user to be optically invisible, but there would still be some sound. No matter what, it is impossible for a person to be in a state of absolute silence. The brushing of wind against the body or the friction between clothes while moving, the slight sound of a heartbeat that does not stop beating, etc. will all make subtle sounds. So even though Nolan was invisible when he moved, he still tiptoed and tried his best to reduce the possibility of being discovered. He wouldn't be so unlucky as to encounter such a powerful expert, right? Bennett had not joined him in this action. Everyone was some distance away from where the voices were coming from. Nolan took a few tenths of seconds to get closer. Walking out of the passages with small bonfires on both sides, the walls on both sides turned into iron bar-like large gates, looking the same as the iron doors that opened after defeating the ruin hunter. Through the gaps in the iron bars, Nolan could see an empty large room inside. Humans are really a bunch of idiots, falling into the secret realm with just a little trick, hee. The conversation continued, and the use of the term humans, together with the strange quality of that wicked laughter, seemed to indicate that its owner was likely not human. And from what was said, could this secret realm really have some conspiracy like little Amy mentioned casually? Nolan did not get close to the iron bar-like large gates for fear of accidentally making noise by touching the clothes. He moved naturally with light steps in the middle of the passage. After a while, he saw an opened large room with iron gates, and was slightly surprised at the scene inside. The ones conversing were really not humans, but abyssal mages. These were intelligent magical creatures from the abyss, and behind them was a notorious evil organization, the Abyss Order. In the room, there were two abyss mages, one with pyro abilities and the other with cryo abilities. They had long ears on their heads, and their frail bodies were dressed in fluffy wide-sleeved robes, holding staves in their hands. Besides them, there were many hilly churls around. 2 hilly churl berserkers with axes, 2 sama churls with crude magic staffs, and 7 or 8 small-sized hilly churls, some wielding wooden sticks, and others carrying crossbows. It was like a small monster nest. While Nolan was both amazed and thrilled at the sight, thinking about the potential adventure EXP he could earn by defeating them. But it was just a thought, he didn't dare to be impulsive. Abyss mages wielded a certain lost ancient language that could manipulate elemental energy. Before breaking their shields, they could only be harmed by their attacks. If that was all, Nolan could still easily take out one of them by relying on his invisibility advantage, since abyssal mages have very weak bodies. But doing so would surely alarm the other abyssal mage and the group of monsters, and Nolan's invisibility would be automatically dispelled after attacking. At that time, he would inevitably be ganged up on. Humans are so greedy yet unable to realize their own foolishness. They think that after spending a long time finding the materials to unlock the seal, they do not realize it is us moving our magic staffs behind the scenes. Speaking was a red-furred pyro abyss mage. Although its mask-like face revealed nothing, it must be feeling quite proud. According to what the 2 abyssal mages said, it seems that the reason those treasure hoarders were able to find the secret realm was also due to their conspiracy, right? Quite cunning indeed, Nolan felt a little admiration. Since that's the case, why did they spend so much time exposing the secret realm reasonably to attract so many people? Nolan wanted to keep listening, but they were busy mocking humans and boasting about their intelligence, without revealing any secrets. Unfortunately, invisibility only lasted for 10 minutes, and it was about to end. This was already quite remarkable. Judging from the fact that even Chris, the debt agent, only had 10 seconds of invisibility, the inspector might not have such an in-depth mastery. Since he still needed to leave time to retreat, Nolan could only return first. When he left the iron bar door and returned to the brick wall passage with small bonfire racks on both sides, the stealth invisibility time was up and Nolan automatically became visible again. Bennett, Fiscal, and Ounce obviously noticed him. So, everyone gathered, and Nolan shared the information he had gathered with them. The secret realm turned out to be a conspiracy by the Abyssal Order. Bennett said with some surprise. Humph, this princess saw through everything long ago. Fiscal slightly lifted her left leg wrapped in over-the-knee black stockings, then covered her left eye, sealed with a black eye mask, striking a handsome pose as she said so confidently. What the miss said. The princess is familiar, Night Raven Ounce, echoed. In any case, let's retreat first, report to Branch Master Cyrus, and then bring them over to eliminate these monsters. Nolan carefully thought and then voiced his suggestion. At times like these, it's better to play it safe, especially considering the number of monsters. Sir Nolan, I don't think it's necessary to retreat. Ounce shook his head as he flapped his night-colored intertwined wings and said. Oh. Nolan looked slightly surprised. Fiscal crossed her arms. On her thin black semi-transparent long gloves were faint golden patterns. She closed her bright green pupils and said confidently and calmly. My attendant, the warrior of the pure land of the spectral night. It seems that this princess' performance against that ruin hunter made you underestimate the might of Sinbreaker. Ounce, follower of the ruler of the Ashen Darkness, continued to speak for Fiscal. Those hilly churls are not made of steel after all. Miss and I can deal with them. I'm sure the 2 brave warriors can handle the 2 abyssal mages. I've encountered cryo abyss mages before. Using pyro elements can break their shields easily. If it's a pyro abyss mage, then I won't be able to do anything about it, modestly said Bennett, scratching the back of his head. Generally speaking, the main method to deal with elemental shields was to use elements different from the shield to create elemental reactions that would deplete it. Bennett wielded pyro elements, capable of triggering a melt reaction with cryo-elemental shields, making him highly efficient at breaking them. However, he would be helpless against a pyro-elemental shield. Listening to everyone's words, Nolan realized that he had indeed been a bit conservative. If Fiscal and Ounce could handle the hilly churls, Bennett could deal with the cryo-abyss mage. As for the remaining pyro-abyss mage, even though Nolan couldn't break its shield, he could easily take it down before it activated the shield while still in stealth. Then there was still room to help Fiscal and the others. Hey, Ounce's idea was entirely feasible. Nolan's eyes slightly brightened. He didn't doubt Fiscal and Bennett's abilities. After all, being a holder of the vision might not guarantee great strength, but as seasoned adventurers, they were undoubtedly strong. Although Nolan had a decent physique, he wasn't made of steel and couldn't withstand several elemental attacks. The same logic applied to those monsters. It seemed that the formidable appearance of the ruin hunter from earlier left a profound impression on Nolan, causing him to view other monsters from the same perspective. Chapter 54, Like Sparkling Fireworks. Ha, since the princess and Bennett are confident, then I certainly can't back down either. The bonfire on the small rack next to him swayed slightly, making Nolan's eyes wander. The flames illuminated his face slightly red as he smiled and said, "The princess didn't make a mistake in choosing you," praised Fiscal. Her fair fingers brushed past the soft, moist lips, outlining a smile as she nodded in approval. "So, any battle plans?" Bennett pressed the goggles on his head and asked. Ounce turned his gaze to Nolan. "Sir, Nolan can use the stealth skill to sneak attack the Pyro Abyss Mage first. If successful, the advantage will be ours." It seemed Ounce had the same idea as Nolan, which was to go for the Pyro Abyss Mage first. Nolan nodded and said, "Yes, just give me a moment to rest." The stealth assassination technique consumed both physical and mental strength. Continuous use without a break could strain the body, so a short resting period was necessary. After confirming there were no issues, this operation plan was finalized. Not long after, when Nolan felt he could use stealth again, everyone began to take action. Since the focus of this simple plan was for Nolan to successfully assassinate the Pyro Abyss Mage, Fiscal and Bennett continued to wait for his news, but this time stayed closer, to avoid delays in support that could put Nolan in danger. Under the effects of stealth, Nolan once again passed through the rooms with iron bar doors, getting closer to the Abyss Mage's position. At this moment, they seemed to be mocking foolish humans. The Cryo Abyss Mage was conversing in the language of the Hilly Churls with a Hilly Churl shaman, while the Pyro Abyss Mage was leisurely using its tiny left hand to prop its head, with its elbow on the ground, lying in a comfortable posture. If it had a perspective beyond the optical, it would see a human aiming an arrow at it. It probably wouldn't be so carefree then. To ensure a guaranteed kill, Nolan used a cryo-imbued, fire-quenched, arrow again. The moment he released, like a fleeting fiery meteor, the silent arrow was so fast it seemed to completely leaving the bow and hitting the target in an instant, appearing right on the Pyro Abyss Mage's forehead. Once again, as if omitting the flight process. The Pyro Abyss Mage did not even have time to scream before falling dead. The fire-imbued arrows were powerful, but also had limits. After all, they were arrows made from fire elemental ore, activated by air friction. In terms of quantity and quality, they fell slightly short compared to Fiscal's genuinely charged elemental arrows. Being able to successfully break through the Ruin Hunter's core earlier was still due to the aid of the overload reaction and Nolan's own extraordinary archery. The key was the latter. If the Abyss Mage had the physique of a hilly churl brute and decent elemental resistance, it wouldn't have been such a smooth victory. However, the Abyss Mage without an activated elemental shield was defenseless. Defeated a powerful enemy, obtained 852 Adventure Express. Excellent. Got the Adventure EXP, definitely killed it. Judging by the EXP gained, this Abyss Mage's strength was not bad. Too bad it no longer had a chance to demonstrate it. Due to how quietly the Pyro Abyss Mage died, it took a second before the hilly churls noticed, and then there was great chaos. Accompanied by roars of rage, various incomprehensible hilly churl phrases filled the air. Since Nolan's spell circulation was disrupted by launching the attack, causing stealth to be dispelled automatically, his figure was quickly noticed by the monsters. "Damn, bastard!" The other Abyss Mage, now covered with a cryo-elemental shield, performed some kind of magic, floating in midair and then instantly appearing in front of him. The Cryo Abyss Mage wasted no words. With a light wave of its staff, several icy spikes emerged around it. The group of hilly churls inside the iron bar room also rushed out. The two hilly churl berserkers in front wielded huge axes aggressively. The icy spikes in front were too close, he would get hit. Nolan did not expect this cryo abyss mage to have such keen battle awareness, instantly teleporting right up to his face. Nolan, dodge! Just as the cryo abyss mage was about to unleash its icy spikes, Bennett charged forward quickly holding his plain steel sword swirling with concentrated pyro elements. Leaping over Nolan's head from behind. Under the expressionless masked face of the cryo abyss mage, the charged-up elemental skill Passion Overload smashed down. The flames made contact with the cryo shield, melting each other in reaction to form some kind of heat wave. Boom! The cryo abyss mage was blasted back, successfully disrupting its skill casting. Nolan took this chance to retreat. His most powerful aspect now was still archery, so keeping distance gave him an advantage. How dare you disrupt the Order's plan? Infuriates me. The cryo abyss mage first breathed a sigh of relief seeing its elemental shield still intact, then realized Nolan's group had come prepared, and their plans may have been exposed already. Go, cut them down. The cryo abyss mage commanded in hilly churl language. They must not let them escape alive. The hilly churl berserkers wielding axes responded incomprehensibly, and charged at Nolan and Bennett with 4 small hilly churls carrying wooden clubs. Behind them a bit further, 2 hilly churls, one shooting electro arrows, the other cryo arrows aimed at Bennett at the forefront. Their crossbow bolts had arrowheads made from shards of electro crystals and cryo ore, which could cause superconduct reactions on the same target, with formidable might. At the very back were 2 crafty hilly churl shamans. The Inmo one waved its staff to summon 3 small tornadoes rushing at Nolan. The Hydro one summoned a small cloud above the cryo abyss mage's head, raining down healing waters. Fool! I'm not injured. The cryo abyss mage roared at the Hydro Samachurl. The Hydro Samachurl hurriedly dispelled its skill in panic. Crossbows, magic. Considering the hilly churl's intellectual capacity, it was unlikely they created these themselves. Without a doubt, the Abyss Order was meddling. Midnight Phantasmagoria. Facing the ferocious incoming hilly churls, Fiscal's wings woven from the night shrouded her. Activating her elemental burst collided into the hilly churls. Every hilly churl nearby was struck by descending lightning, taking electro damage and getting paralyzed. Although the cryo abyss mage's elemental shield remained intact, it had depleted a considerable amount of its cryo elemental power. Nolan certainly did not want to miss this chance. As a fellow archer, he understood clearly the deterrence posed by the electro and cryo hilly churl crossbowmen at the back. So he swiftly shot 2 armor-piercing arrows at them. Unexpectedly, the arrows were blocked slightly by their bony masks and did not take them out in one shot. He had to follow up with 2 more arrows before they fell down, unable to get up. Defeated a powerful enemy, obtained 156 Adventure Express. Defeated a powerful enemy, obtained 177 Adventure Express. Chapter 55, The Truth of the Secret Realm. After defeating 2 archer hilly churls, the Inmo shaman's 3 wind tornadoes, previously unleashed, slowly swept over. Bennett knelt down and jumped back to dodge them. The 2 axe-wielding hilly churl, previously paralyzed by Fiscal's lightning, were recovering. Unfortunately, the wind tornadoes didn't touch them. Otherwise, the electro element on their bodies dispersed by the Inmo element would have caused secondary electro-charged damage, inflicted by their own teammates. After unleashing her elemental burst, Fiscal and Ounce teleported to the back of the monsters and then stopped. In front of her was the panicked Inmo Samachurl who had turned around. A victorious smile was drawn on Fiscal's fair face, her ornate long bow shaped like musical notes was pulled open. Before the arrow was even shot, its arrowhead was already pressed against the Inmo hilly churl's mask, with intense electro-element condensed on the tip. This is the dream of the Evernight. Fiscal's soft lips parted slightly, the taut bowstring slipped from her snow-white fingertips, then bloomed like flowers. The Inmo hilly churl shaman flickered with electro-element as it fell back. At this time, Night Raven Ounce also spat the electro bullet out of his beak at the same time, shooting it at the another hilly churl shaman. The Hydro hilly churl shaman was clearly more of a support role, with somewhat lacking offensive abilities. In desperation, it actually used its crude staff to hit Ounce. Easily dodged by Ounce, the Hydro hilly churl shaman was also very frail, actually losing control of the staff it was swinging, and tripping over onto the ground. Just as it was about to get up, the electro bullets would not give it a chance. The groups of small electro balls struck its body, from tingling to numbness and then to loss of consciousness. It was hard to imagine what it had experienced. Seeing its subordinates defeated so quickly, the Cryo-Abyss Mage was a little anxious. It spun in midair holding its staff, conjuring blades of ice that revolved around the Abyss Mage, then the range slowly expanded. The Cryo-Abyss Mage was trying to leave its enemies with nowhere to escape. Naturally, Nolan and the others wouldn't just sit back and wait for their doom. Since the Abyss Mage was surrounded by revolving icy blades, it was very difficult to approach them. Bennett at the front was also entangled with the Hilly Churl Berserker and several Hilly Churls with wooden club, unable to free himself. Fortunately, Electro Element also had good shield-breaking effects against the Cryo-Elemental Shield. Ounce's continuous barrage of electro bullets mostly got blocked by the Abyss Mage's Rhymestorm right. Occasionally, a couple hit the Ice Elemental Shield, but the shield's consumption was minimal. On the other hand, Fiskal's charged shots were consistently blocked by the Rhymestorm right, icy blades. At this rate, the revolving icy blades around the Abyss Mage would expand to a certain range in just a few seconds. Nolan and Fiskal at both ends of the passage could retreat to dodge it. But Bennett, who was surrounded and beaten by the Hilly Churls, would inevitably be injured. Nolan, who could not channel elemental energy under normal circumstances, would definitely have difficulty breaking the situation. Fortunately, he still had enough pyro-imbued arrows, and it would not be difficult to hit the Abyssal Mage's shield with his superior archery skills. Nolan aimed at the brief gap between the revolving icy blades, and the next moment the arrowhead infused with pyro element struck the Abyss Mage's shield. The sudden fusion reaction made the shield tremble, startling the Cryo-Abyss Mage so much that the revolving icy blades all halted for a moment, before it continued dancing and casting again. "Damn human, so lucky, but you won't have a chance again." As it spoke, the icy blades spun even faster. It seemed Fiskal had also succeeded in capturing the gap between the icy blades earlier, but still could not shoot her electro-infused arrow into the Cryo-Abyss Mage. The main reason was that the speed of the arrows was limited. By the time they reached the gap, they were already blocked by the icy blades. Now that the blades were spinning even faster, it was even harder to break through. Even Ounce's continuous electro-elemental shots were completely blocked. But the Abyss Mage doing this was not without cost, which was that the speed at which the icy blades expanded also slowed down. "Get out of my way, all of you." After fighting with the Hilly Churls for a long time, Bennett's elemental energy finally filled up. With one elemental burst, the Hilly Churls were blasted back. The fantastic voyage field appeared on the ground. Standing in it, Bennett immediately became much braver. Previously pressed down by a group of monsters, now he was pressing down on the group alone. Fiskal and Ounce also did not waste effort on the Cryo-Abyss Mage, directly joining Bennett's fight to deal with these Hilly Churls first. Nolan glanced at the battlefield where the situation had instantly reversed. Once again he knocked a pyro-infused arrow on the bowstring. The constantly spinning icy blades were indeed difficult to deal with, but they had little effect against Nolan's incredibly fast and silent shadowless archery skills. Since earlier, Bennett and Fiskal had already depleted the Cryo-Abyss Mage's elemental shield quite a bit. So when the second pyro-infused arrow triggered a fusion reaction, the icy shield on the Abyss Mage directly shattered. It also fell from midair, shaking its head, stunned by the magical backlash. The icy blades revolving around the Abyss Mage also dissipated into Cryo Element. Defeated a powerful enemy, obtained 902 Adventure Express. Dazed, the Cryo Abyss Mage basically had no ability to resist anymore, smoothly obtaining the Adventure EXP. At this time on Bennett and Fiskal's battlefield, electro and pyro elements intertwined, the Hilly Churl Berserkers were blasted back again and again, and the small Hilly Churls had long been blown away to some corner. Seeing there was still a chance to finish off the two Hilly Churl Berserkers, Nolan also joined Bennett and the others. That was Adventure EXP that could not be wasted. Joining the fight, volleys of armor-piercing arrows pierced the Hilly Churl Berserkers' bodies, their movements grew slower and slower, their arms could no longer lift up the axes. Finally, after stumbling for a while, they collapsed. Defeated a powerful enemy, obtained 485 Adventure Express. Defeated a powerful enemy, obtained 462 Adventure Express. Phew, what an intense battle. Bennett wiped the sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand, swinging the dark sword once, it dissipated into particles of light and was withdrawn back into the vision. "Well done, warriors. I've witnessed your bravery, worthy of praise from this princess." Fiskal pressed both hands, clad in thin black silk gloves, at her waist, tilting her fair chin slightly to reveal a haughty smile. Everyone worked hard. Once confirming there were no monsters left standing, Ounce spoke as such. So next, let's interrogate this guy. Nolan felt a bit weary in the brain. He rubbed his head and shifted his gaze to the still dizzy cryo-abyss mage. Keeping it alive was something everyone had agreed on initially. After all, they still needed to find out the truth from the abyss mage about why they lured people into this secret realm. When the cryo-abyss mage woke up and found 3 despicable humans standing with their arms crossed around it, it clenched its fist, then shamefully cowered. Haha, strong human warriors, what can I do for you? The cryo-abyss mage forced out a dry, hoarse laugh with its synthesized, monstrous voice. Although loyal to the abyss, as a member of the intelligent races, pursuing benefits and avoiding harm was also its instinct. Seeing these humans clearly still needed it, for now, a temporary compromise was the only resort. Chapter 56, Secret Ruin Secrets. Speak, what's your purpose in luring adventurers into this secret realm? Nolan looked down at the cryo-abyss mage and questioned. So you did know. The cryo-abyss mage felt things were as expected, but was also puzzled how these humans knew. Moreover, this was the second layer of the realm. How did they explore this deep in such a short time? Enough nonsense. Answer the questions of this princess's attendant quickly. Fiscal's fair hand clenched into a fist, showing a threatening posture. Don't hit, don't hit. The cryo-abyss mage begged for mercy, then couldn't help but smirk and said, hee, even if I tell you, what can you do? Our goal has already been achieved when so many humans entered here. Oh. Ounce's voice sounded puzzled. Nolan and the other 2 frowned upon hearing its words, obviously somewhat worried. Seeing the humans' reactions, the cryo-abyss mage felt very satisfied and continued. This secret realm originally didn't have a teleportation portal here. Our great Apostle Lord used powerful strength to tear open a spatial crack leading to the interior of the secret realm. Is the Apostle Lord perhaps an Abyss Herald? Nolan pondered. He vaguely remembered that the Abyss Order did indeed have significant achievements in spatial abilities, even possessing a complete teleportation network of their own, allowing them to go wherever they pleased, much more powerful than teleportation waypoints. Of course, the Apostle Lord is busy, so after assigning the task to us, he left. Humph, otherwise, just a movement of his finger, and you would all be buried here. The cryo-abyss mage danced around, looking very pleased when mentioning the Apostle Lord. Fiscal raised her right leg in high-heeled boots. The black pantyhose tightly wrapped her legs, molding her bent knees even more shapely. Before she could kick, the cryo-abyss mage, on its own, covered its head and let out a miserable scream. Stop bragging about your Apostle Lord and continue to tell what you know. Nolan thought for a moment and continued. The ice abyss mage nodded, then smirked again. Hee, what's special about this secret realm is that a demon god's remains is sleeping within. When alive it greatly despised creatures like humans, and even in death that resentment remains the same. Usually, even if 1 or 2 adventurers accidentally enter this secret realm, there won't be any issues. But when a large number of humans enter the secret realm, it will definitely awaken. I believe the demon god's remains are in the process of waking up now. Even if you know this information, it's useless. How does it feel? Scary, isn't it? Hee. Bennett scratched his golden hair in puzzlement. Demon god's remains? What's that? Even as an experienced adventurer, he rarely heard of things related to demon gods. Legend has it that demon gods are powerful beings. Even after their demise, they probably leave something behind, and that should be the demon god's remains. Fiscal, having read relevant travelogues and rumors, had some understanding. Yes, it's indeed something extraordinary. Ounce, who was flapping his night-colored wings, also said. It seems there's trouble. Awakening the demon god's remains by the Abyss Order wouldn't be an attempt to let it leave the secret realm and pose a certain level of threat to Mondstadt City, right? Nolan asked thoughtfully. The Abyss Order, opposing the civilization of Teyvat, covets all living creatures on the land, aiming to overthrow the world ruled by the Seven, so such actions were not hard to understand. Oh? Human, it seems you are quite clever. Yes, that's exactly it. The cryo-abyss mage openly admitted. What? In that case, Mondstadt City is in danger. Bennett widened his eyes, evidently taken aback by the massive conspiracy of the Abyss Order. Ounce, do you have any countermeasures? Fiscal looked down at the ground, her fair face filled with concern. Well, miss, this is a realm. Even if the demon god's remains awaken and want to go outside, it will have to go through a teleportation portal. As long as we close it in advance, there should be no problem. Ounce's words indeed made sense. As long as the portal was closed, the demon god's remains would be confined within the realm and couldn't affect the outside. Impossible. You can't do it. The teleportation portal in this secret realm has been reinforced by the Apostle Lord. It's not so easily destroyed in a short time, the Ice Abyss Mage sneered, shaking its head. It continued mockingly. Moreover, with so many adventurers in the secret realm, do you intend to abandon them by closing the gate? You humans can't do such a thing, right? By the time you notify each of them to evacuate from the secret realm, the demon god's remains would probably be fully awakened. Hate to admit it, but the bastard Abyss Mage was indeed right. The demon god's remains that could be considered a threat by the Abyss Order to Mondstadt City, would definitely not be weak, and it was indeed dangerous to just let it run out like this. However, even if Nolan and the others informed the Adventurers Guild about this news and tried to gather adventurers to evacuate and destroy the teleportation portal, it would still take a considerable amount of time. From this perspective, the Abyss Order's conspiracy seemed to be successful. However, there was one thing the Abyss Mage did not mention at all. It intentionally led Nolan and others to believe that the demon god's remains would be powerful and terrifying upon awakening. But it never mentioned the situation before awakening. The focus should be on what happens afterward. The main body of the demon god had long passed away, and the remaining fragments couldn't become stronger with time. It must have been a process of gradual decay over an extended period. Considering the era when demon gods were commonly existed until now, it was highly likely that the demon god's remains were now like a dying candle in the wind. Otherwise, there would not be an awakening process. It seemed its awakening was nothing more than the final flare before extinction. The Abyss Order probably wanted to exploit the last bit of value from the demon god's remains, thus concocting this conspiracy. If, as expected, they could interrupt the remains' final flare here and make it perish prematurely, then all problems and crises could be readily resolved. These were just speculations though, and Nolan did not dare confirm. To further confirm, he voiced his speculations and secretly observed the Abyss Mage's reaction. As expected of Sir Nolan. I quite agree with your thinking. First was Ounce. He had not considered this possibility before, yet the odds were not small. Then if we find and get rid of that demon thing early, Mondstadt won't be in danger. Bennett's emerald eyes lit up with excitement. I see, a mere prisoner still dares frighten this princess. Fiscal's confident expression returned on her fair face as she glared at the Cryo Abyss Mage on the ground. From the moment Nolan spoke his guesses, this Abyss Mage had sunk into silence. The most crucial task assigned to them by the Apostle Lord was to prevent any adventurers from getting close to the demon god's remains before it fully woke up. End of chapter. Sparkle sparkle sparkle. T/N, in Genshin Impact, the term demon god is used in Korean, Chinese, and Japanese translations to refer to the Archon War, which is also known as the War of the Demon Gods. Demon gods are divine and have a higher level of power and authority than other divine creatures. They are also said to have mostly existed before the war. The unknown god's name in the game files is Asmodee, which comes from a demon in the Ars Goetia. The former Electro Archon, Makoto, was also named Baal, and the current Electro Archon, Raiden Ei, uses the name Baal as a disguise. Chapter 57, Hilly Churl Chieftain. Observing the reaction of the Cryo Abyss Mage, Nolan knew that his speculations might be true. Otherwise, there would be no need to go through so much trouble just to unleash demon god remains, not only setting up spatial teleports, but also spending time designing it into an alluring secret realm. It was all to provoke the demon god's remains which detested humans. They wanted it to hasten its own erosion as it neared extinction, regaining some of the main demon god's power, to cause a negligible impact on the human civilizations ruled by the Seven. The Ice Abyss Mage, driven by its instinct for self-preservation, had no choice but to reveal the Order's plan. However, it still wanted the plan to proceed smoothly, otherwise, even if it managed to escape temporarily, it would inevitably face the Abyss Apostle's consequences. It was this greedy intention to have it both ways that exposed its flaws. The Cryo Abyss Mage waved its skinny hands hurriedly. Wait. Those are just your arrogant guesses. The demon god's remains are extremely dangerous. Even the Apostle Lord can't. No, I mean, it can fight on par with the Apostle Lord. Nolan chuckled, saying, all right, stop evading. The demon god's remains haven't awakened yet, so how do you know it can match your Apostle Lord? The Abyss Mage choked up immediately. Following this, Nolan and his companions pressured it for the specific location of the demon god's remains. The already cowardly Abyss Mage had no choice but to speak. According to its words, this secret realm had 3 layers, and they were currently on the 2nd layer, with the demon god's remains located on the 3rd layer. The path to the 3rd layer was just ahead. Even without the Abyss Mage's directions, they could easily find it. Yet it still stubbornly claimed, there is an extremely powerful monster guarding the entrance to the 3rd layer. It's impossible for you all to break through. They ignored its words. Powerful or not had to be seen firsthand. They could not let it intimidate them and delay handling the demon god's remains. Finally, Nolan also wanted to ask about secrets within the Abyss Order. However, as a low-ranking monster, it found it challenging to understand such matters. One interesting thing was Nolan noticed it referred to the Abyss Order's leader as Prince. That was an unexpected piece of information. After it seemed no more intel could be squeezed out, to prevent this Abyss Mage from continuing to threaten humans, they disposed of it. Although Nolan was very interested in their magic to wield elements without a vision. But learning a lost ancient language was not something easily picked up in a short time. Keeping an Abyss Mage around, he was a little worried people might think he was colluding with the Abyss Order. So he gave up on the idea. Everyone, since the direction to the 3rd layer is up ahead, let me scout the way for you first, said Ounce. Now that the Abyss Order's scheme was known, they certainly could not sit idle. Ounce would scout first. If it really came down to it, they would have to go out for reinforcements. After all, getting more intel meant wasting less time. What monster could be guarding the 3rd layer entrance? Ounce fluttered his dark wings and sped off like lightning. Fiscal continued walking in front, with Nolan and Bennett following behind. To save time, materials dropped by monsters could only be left for now to collect on the way back. On the way to the 3rd layer of the secret realm, there were significant changes in the surroundings. Firstly, the iron-barred rooms on both sides gradually disappeared. The small bonfire racks used for lighting also changed into fire sconces embedded sideways into the walls. Under such circumstances, after walking 5 to 6 minutes, Fiscal stopped her legs wrapped in crisscrossed black stockings. Through sharing the vision with Ounce, she saw the entrance to the 3rd layer of the realm at the end of the road, guarded by the Abyss Order's arranged gigantic monster Stonehide Lawachurl. According to the Adventurers Guild's records, some Mitichurls would accumulate massive amounts of different elements within their bodies for various reasons. This situation could be very dangerous, but could also trigger some mutations, evolving into ferocious Hilly-Churl chieftains Lawachurls. The Stonehide Lawachurl was one such case. The abundant geo-elements constantly accumulating and growing within would seep out, becoming their flesh, skin, and armor sculpted like rock. Not only did such geo-element armor grant them massive bodies unlike common Hilly-Churl mobs, but the supreme strength also came with extraordinary defense. This was not an existence that ordinary adventurers could challenge. When Fiscal relayed what she saw to Nolan and Bennett, Ounce had also returned from scouting to discuss countermeasures with everyone. Bennett rubbed the back of his head, recalling with some lingering fear. Stonehide Lawachurls are very violent, terrifying monsters. Whenever I encountered them before in adventures, I'd run far away. Once, unluckily, a frenzied Lawachurl noticed me. Got punched once and nearly couldn't make it back to Mondstadt. Thankfully I had an elemental burst reserved then to barely escape. Hearing Bennett's words, Nolan didn't find it surprising that he, being rather unlucky, had experienced such a dangerous encounter. This princess remembers that to deal with Stonehide Lawachurl, their geo-armor must be destroyed first. Otherwise, trying to go head-on is simply unwise. Fiscal's index finger pressed on her fair chin, the soft skin sinking in slightly as she pondered and spoke. To break through a Stonehide Lawachurl's geo-armor, the best method is using geo-attacks, or heavy claymores. But we have neither. Although Nolan knew some basic swordsmanship, and also learned a bit from Mula, with so much experience gained he could rapidly improve his sword skills to a decent level in a short time. That should be enough to handle the Hilly-Churl chieftain. But alas, he did not have any two-handed weapons. Fiscal and the others also could not wield geo-elements. Oh! I remember overload reactions between Pyro and Electro have good effects against them too, Ounce the Night Raven, Princess's attendant, said. Even so, dealing with the Stonehide Lawachurl might be a bit challenging. After all, with its geo-elemental armor, it won't be affected by the knockback control of overload. It's practically invincible. Bennett shrugged and said. Everyone seemed to make valid points. After a brief contemplation, Nolan suggested, "All right, since it involves the matter of the demon god's remains, we can't simply retreat like this. At the very least, we should test the Stonehide Lawachurl's strength first. We'll use bows for long-range attacks, it's safer that way. This should be the most prudent approach for now, able to attack, and also flee if needed." End of chapter. T/N, a Mitachurl that has mutated due to an accumulation of a large amount of elements in its body. They are bigger, stronger, and absolutely ferocious. Hilly churls worship no gods and follow no order or discipline. The strongest and the most ferocious one among them is seen as fit to lead the tribe. Adventurer Handbook. These powerful hilly churls are called Lawa by the rest of the tribe, a respectful form of address best translated to mean king or chief. However, Lawa doesn't actually rule over or lead the tribe at all. Rather, these large loners prefer solitude, avoiding the looks of reverence from the smaller hilly churls. Adventurers very rarely encounter these gigantic creatures. Still, even the most seasoned adventurers will think twice before going on expeditions into areas where these dangerous Lawas may be roaming. Hilly Churl Cultural Customs, Volume 3. Chapter 58, The Blocked Path. Nolan's idea was approved, and they decided to boldly provoke the formidable Hilly Churl chieftain. The group continued forward. Based on ounce scouting, it would take another 5 minutes or so before reaching where the Lawachurl guarded the third layer entrance. The torch sconces on the walls dispelled the darkness nearby with their glow. Before long, this temporary adventure team stopped advancing. They could already see in the distance about 150 meters away, the fierce monster sitting on the ground. With a mountain-like robust body, it far surpassed the Mitachurl mobs in ferocity. "Let's stop here, going further might be dangerous," Night Raven Ounce turned his head and said to everyone. Approximately 150 meters away from the fierce monster, this distance allowed for a reaction time for everyone to escape in case of unexpected situations. After all, the Hilly Churl chieftain wasn't a bulky creature, its body was well muscled, and running resembled a runaway carriage loaded with goods but out of control. Its violent and ferocious appearance was akin to a demon god in the mortal world. "Humph, let this judging princess bring you punishment." Fiscal lightly covered her left eye, a smile forming on her fair face as a bow, resembling a musical note, appeared in her hand. The 5-star bow, combined with Fiscal's decent archery skills, should accurately hit the Lawachurl from a distance. Nolan also prepared his adventurer's hunting bow. Since the target was far away, they did not rely on the arrow's own force to injure the chieftain, but the elemental powers and reactions between them. With her left hand gripping the longbow and the right hand placing the arrow on the taut bowstring, Fiscal effortlessly drew back. Her elbow pointed up, raised to shoulder level as she pulled. Her line of sight went along her arm, taking in the soft snowy side under her armpit. Concentrated electro-element began accumulating on Fiscal's arrowhead, giving off dazzling ivory and azure radiance. Nolan also took out a fire-imbued arrow, but without air resistance friction, it was dull and dark. The 2 arrows shot out one after another. The electro arrow fell on the Lawachurl's head like an azure meteor. Considering his own arrows were faster, Nolan waited until after Fiscal's hit before firing his imbued arrow. The lightning meteor struck the dazed chieftain. The next moment, the fiery arrow followed closely. An overload reaction erupted, causing the Lawachurl's upper body to lift slightly. Then it instantly woke up, just in time to see 2 spent arrows drop from its head. Despite the geo armor, it still felt slight burns and numbness. Although not very intelligent, even a beast like a bull knew it was being attacked by annoying insects, let alone the primitive civilization of the Hill Churl. As the ruler among Hill Churls, no one had dared to provoke it before. The Lawachurl suddenly stood up, roared, and on its massive body, the rock-like armor emitted a dense glow of geo elements. With an angry gaze, it noticed a few insects running fast in the distance. The Lawachurl crouched slightly, its heavily muscled black calves suddenly swelling. With blood vessels apparent, it leaped, smashing down more than 10 meters away, shattering the brick ground beneath its feet. Leveraging the cracked, spiderweb-like hollows on the ground, the air friction over its body, it charged like an enraged bull at the audacious bugs. FK. At this moment, Nolan and the others wished they had 2 more legs, it was just not enough. Originally, they thought that even if the attacks didn't do much damage to Lawachurl, it should at least be stunned for a while. However, they hadn't expected it to merely shake its head. Then unexpectedly, this guy actually held a grudge and rushed right at them. Such might, could it be the demon god instead? Fiscal's hands constantly waved beside the black silk sleeves as she glanced back. The Lawachurl is already closed to within 100 meters. It's too frightening. Bennett sprinted with eyes closed. This Lawachurl was shockingly strong. Converted to level, it was at least 50. No wonder the Abyss Herald stationed it here to guard. Listening to Fiscal's short boots continuously tapping the ground beside him, Nolan brushed aside the black skirt that had been blown over his face by the airflow during the run. Then he spoke. Calm down, it may not chase us too far. After all, it still has the task of guarding the entrance to the third layer. His relatively good physique allowed him to speak while running without being out of breath. Actually, he could run even faster, but that would leave his two companions behind, which seemed too selfish and inconsiderate. Moreover, with Bennett's unlucky constitution, the probability of them being caught up by the hilly Churl chieftain was quite high. That would be too dangerous. Watching the approaching Lawachurl, Nolan had little time to think. Through the battles he experienced before, although he didn't defeat all the monsters, the gains in Adventure EXP were quite substantial. Adventure EXP, 5573. Looking at the total over 5,000 Adventure Express on the panel, he pondered briefly, then allocated it all into his character level. Adventure EXP minus 5573. Instantly, countless warm currents appeared within, comprehensively nurturing and evolving his body. There was no significant change in appearance, leveling up was elevating the level of life, evolving the race. The power obtained in this way was relatively subtle. Name, Nolan Walker. Level, LV.14, 973/1400. Race, Human. Title, None. Innate talent, Entangling Affection. Skills, Hunter's Archery LV.10, Silent Shadow, Favonius Archery, Fundamentals LV.2, 0/200, Martial Arts LV.2, 0/200, Favonius Swordsmanship, Fundamentals LV.1, 1/100, Favonius Swordsmanship, Noble, Royal, LV.1, 2/100, Stealth Assassination LV.4, 0/400. Specialties, Descender, Maiden Savior. Adventure EXP, 0. Glancing at the character panel that rose 4 levels in one go, this was Nolan's first time leaving the Adventure EXP column at 0. Before, he would leave a little, not necessarily as a reserve, but it looked more comfortable. Still, less than half of the EXP were needed for level 15, not bad. The process of leveling up was a momentary thing, and they weren't caught up by Lawachurl because of it. Attendant, didn't you say it had to guard the entrance? Why is it still chasing us? Fiscal looked at the approaching monster, sweat dripping from her fair cheeks, her gaze showing some nervousness. Miss, allow me to block for everyone. Ounce flew on the side, looking much more relaxed. Phew. Nolan took a deep breath, then exhaled and said, don't worry, leave it to me. Nolan slowed half a step, then swapped positions with Fiscal, coming between them. He continued saying, next, I'll take you two and run. First, he got close to Fiscal, reaching his right arm around her back and hugging her soft waist below the skirted dress, lifting her slightly off the ground. Fiscal suddenly faced forward, her field of vision inverted, the ground continuously receding, making her feel dizzy. Nolan used the same method to bring Bennett, who couldn't speak, to his left side. Bearing 2 people's weight alone, he sprinted even faster. Even the flying ounce was left behind instantly. He had to flap his wings rapidly to catch up. T/N, run, Barry, run. Chapter 59, Bait. Bonus Chapter 2/3, Power Stones 777 White Heavy check mark. Thanks to his powerful physique, Nolan was able to pull farther and farther away from the Lawachurl even while carrying 2 people. The hilly Churl chieftain could only watch angrily as the tiny bugs shrank into the distance, letting out a furious roar before turning back, giving up on getting revenge on the bugs. Phew. Nolan exhaled, letting go of the 2 people in his hands. Glancing at the fallen monsters around, it seemed they had run back to their original positions. That Lawachurl was too grudge-bearing, chasing them this far. We made it, we got away. Bennett said excitedly, standing up and jumping lightly. He looked at Nolan in amazement. You look about the same as me, how can you be so strong? Cough. Nolan didn't know how to respond, so he simply explained, this might be the body's potential brought out in a desperate situation. Really? As expected, to become a great adventurer I have to go to more dangerous places and take risks. Bennett nodded in agreement, this reasoning matched his imagination. Oh? Don't have such dangerous thoughts, most adventurers are devoured by danger before their potential is triggered in a desperate situation. Ounce, slightly surprised by Nolan's powerful body function, suggested. After all, there were always some gifted individuals in the world. If you want to get stronger, it's still better to challenge reachable goals through persistent and unremitting training, step by step, Ounce advised. Hehe, you're right, I got too excited, Bennett said somewhat embarrassedly, rubbing his hair. On the side, Fiscal used her fair hands to rub her abdomen through the black silk part of her one-piece dress. Because of the intense running while holding onto this area, her stomach was slightly sore. Fiscal pursed her moist lips, looking at Nolan with a smile in her bright green eyes, as expected of my most reliable attendant, I'm never stingy with my praise. However, your rough actions were quite unbecoming for a princess like me, humph, you balanced your merits and faults, she said with a haughty humph, raising her soft chin. Fiscal has developed good feelings towards you, obtained 300 affection points. Current affection level LV.4, 305/400. Alright, your inner feelings betray that tsundere expression of yours. Haha, sorry princess, because the situation was urgent I was inconsiderate, Nolan said, going along with her. But doesn't this situation mean we can't make it to the third layer? Bennett said dejectedly. The unknown demon god's remains were regenerating, the situation was still urgent. But that law which was unbeatable for them, was indeed troublesome. Since it's like this, we can only go out and ask the other Adventurers Guild members for help. Otherwise when the demon god's remains revive it'll be a big problem, Ounce said. Ounce you can fly faster, so we'll leave that to you. We'll try to find another way here. Nolan nodded in agreement. Now, Ounce was the only one who could quickly convey information to the Adventurers Guild. After all, for Nolan and the others to go up from the circular dome room where they fell from the beginning would take quite some time. And if they went to find the second layer route leading to the first layer, that would be a foolish move. But while Ounce went to get reinforcements, Nolan and the others couldn't just wait around doing nothing. After all, it would take some time for the Adventurers Guild to gather people after learning about the situation. He thought carefully for a bit before suggesting cautiously, I thought of a bait tactic that might be worth trying. Oh. Fiscal had her hands on her hips, her fingertips stroking the slightly visible and thin black underwear beneath her dress on her belly. She looked at her reliable attendant and asked, could it be you're thinking of luring the Lawachurl away, allowing this princess and Bennett to sneak in? Hey! Is that really okay? Bennett said worriedly about his companion's safety. Nolan shook his head to indicate no need to worry and said, you all saw, I can outrun the Lawachurl. After you successfully sneak in, I'll use a stealth technique to lose the Lawachurl then come join up with you all. The Lawachurl had low intelligence, so the feasibility of this plan was high. In that case, it's indeed a good proposal. Ounce nodded slightly, showing agreement with Nolan's bait tactic. Everyone was an experienced adventurer, and after a little thought, they realized it was currently the best way. After confirming there were no issues, Ounce set off to get reinforcements. The Lawachurl was a huge threat, no matter what it needed to be dealt with. Nolan returned to outside the third layer entrance, and the Lawachurl had just walked back and sat down. Fiscal and Bennett hid nearby. Nolan took a deep breath to relax his body, then used his adventurer's bow to shoot the Lawachurl in the eye once more. He used an armor-piercing arrow this time. Though it hit its target, unfortunately, it didn't cause any real damage. After all, its eyes were also well protected. The arrow, deprived of momentum, fell down like a dry branch from a tree onto the Lawachurl's head. Although the Lawachurl with its geo armor wasn't injured, the slight pain still made it furious. Realizing it was the bugs from before again, the Lawachurl leapt up angrily from the ground it had just sat on. The massive body broke through the air, causing the ground to tremble again. Nolan turned and ran without hesitation, but he didn't create too much distance, instead, he slowly lured the hilly Churl chieftain, letting it feel like it could catch him. Watching the Lawachurl chase Nolan away, Fiscal and Bennett seized the chance to run for the third layer entrance. The process went pretty smoothly, with no accidents. After a long time, Nolan felt he had run far enough, so right in front of the angry Lawachurl he used stealth assassination to enter stealth and disappear. The Lawachurl slammed on the brakes, stunned for a moment, looking left and right trying to find Nolan's location. But it couldn't see him. Nolan quietly controlled his footsteps to sneak past it. When he got some distance away, judging the Lawachurl probably couldn't hear, he rushed for the unguarded third layer entrance. The Lawachurl searched for a long time but still couldn't find the damned bug. It roared in dissatisfaction and anger, then walked back. The entrance to the third layer was a winding staircase of brick blocks. Nolan revealed his figure, while Bennett and Fiskal had been waiting there for a long time. Chapter 60, Abyssal Being. A mere attendant making his princess wait so long, I thought you'd been eaten up. Fiskal had her arms crossed, her golden hair cascading down to lightly cover her snow-white back. Although she had witnessed Nolan's formidable stealth skills, facing such a powerful monster she still couldn't help but worry somewhat. Well, just to be safe I had to lead the Lawachurl farther away, Nolan said with a slight smile. He was worried the Lawachurl would discover the two hiding nearby, and wasn't sure he could provide support in time. Let's head down quickly, or that fearsome guy will be back soon, Bennett said, seeming to have already glimpsed the Lawachurl's domineering silhouette striding arrogantly in the distance. The three followed the winding stairs down. Every so often there would be wooden scaffolding with braziers on top, with burning firewood inside lighting up the surrounding area. It felt like exploring some uninhabited dungeon, with nothing but their footsteps and breathing echoing in the silence around them. Princess Fiskal took out the treasured artifact Anchor of Temporal Wheel, and clicked open the bright silver lid sealing away the power of time-space. Through this artifact, Fiskal could observe the passage of time that it anchored in this world at any time. Nolan glanced over, it was 3 p.m. now. Click, the pocket watch was closed. Very good, this princess feels we're close to our destination. Fiskal slightly tightened her grip on the pocket watch, which instantly turned into a point of light and dissipated, withdrew into her vision. Seemingly confirming Fiskal's words, not long after, the three in the group stepped onto a somewhat dark but solid ground. The ground's dark hue seemed as if some dye had accidentally spilled on paper, seeping into the interior, giving an ominous feeling. The environment here on the third layer seems to be polluted by some kind of power. Bennett thought for a bit and said uncertainly. It might be that demon god's remains, Nolan nodded and guessed in response. There's some power here that can cause mental confusion, we can't stay too long. We need to quickly find and eliminate the demon god's remains, then get out of here. Bennett's vision gave him much keener perception of energies compared to Nolan. It does seem that way. Nolan tried to recall and answer a math problem from elementary school, realizing that his mental agility was indeed somewhat diminished. If Bennett hadn't mentioned some strange energy affecting them, Nolan wouldn't have noticed anything himself. As they continued forward, they saw wisps of dark mist floating in the air, unabashedly drifting in a specific direction. The three exchanged glances, nodded, and jogged to catch up. Before long, the group arrived at a place filled with dark mist. The mist continuously converged from all directions, forming a huge dark mist ball. Look over there. Bennett pointed at the condensed ball of dark mist. On its surface could be indistinctly seen a huge scaly tail of some creature standing on two legs and roaring at them. Looking closely at its face, there seemed to be 3 horizontal black eyes, giving a deeply horrifying feeling. Meeting its gaze, one's thoughts seemed to be suddenly stirred into chaos, with various fragmented memories and ideas surfacing without knowing which to focus on, truly messy beyond compare. Fortunately the situation wasn't too severe, and Nolan and the others quickly averted their eyes. This kind of chaotic power doesn't seem to match any famous Archon's abilities. Moreover, this kind of chaos somewhat resembles the description of the abyss in the ancient texts. Ounce, who was flapping his night-colored wings, was not around for the time being, and Her Royal Highness, ruler of the Ashen Darkness, who looked a bit lonely, looked at the roaring demon god for a while before shifting her gaze away. Princess, are you saying that it's actually an Archon from the abyss? Nolan asked with confusion. Maybe. Even the ruler of the Ashen Darkness had things she didn't understand. This monster has been absorbing the dark mist continuously, and it seems to have solidified quite a bit. Nolan remembered the Cryo-Abyss mage had said this was a grudge left behind by the fallen god's remnants. As a phantom grudge, it naturally had no physical form. But now, in this situation, was it trying to forcefully condense a form to obtain a portion of the main body's power? To achieve this, even if the demon god's grudge accelerated its own wear and tear, it would still be impossible. Certainly, the assistance provided by the Abyss Order was indispensable. Perhaps the absorbed dark mist played a role in this. My attendant, dispose of it. This princess does not wish to linger in such a fallen place. Fiscal felt the eerie environment here made her deeply uncomfortable. After Fiscal spoke, she directly condensed an arrow of electro-energy and shot it towards the demon god's remnant. The electro-energy collided with the dark misty spherical entity, causing a considerable dispersion of the dark mist. "I'll help too." Bennett rushed at the remnants with his sword, jumping up to use his elemental skill Passion Overload to strike the dark fog. The attached electro reacted in an overload explosion, blowing away and dispersing even more mist. Facing the attacks, the lingering grudge could only roar helplessly, unable to retaliate at all. It should have perished long ago. While absorbing the dark mists in an attempt to revive itself, it was also restricted by them. No wonder that La Witcherl guarded the entrance. Before the demon god's remains successfully completed its awakening, it was unable to resist at all. Bennett's elemental skill continued to attack, and Fiscal used Electro Arrow to cooperate, causing even greater damage with overload reactions. Nolan also didn't stand idle and attacked the demon god's remains. He used his fire-infused arrows one by one, continuously hitting the grudge left by the demon god. When he just took out the last fire-infused arrow, a notification sound from the character panel rang out. Defeated a powerful enemy, obtained 121 Adventure Express. Nolan was dumbfounded, looking to where the remnants had been. The dark mists were long gone, with no trace left of the grudge. Was it weakened to such an extent? Was it even weaker than a hilly churl? Looking at the last pyro-infused arrow in hand, Nolan was speechless, feeling he had lost 10 billion mora. Once the arrowheads infused with pyro are triggered, these pyro arrows have no further use. All those arrows just to gain 121 Adventure Express less than a single hilly churl. What kind of garbage demon god is this? For a moment Nolan's mood was incredibly complicated. He had thought, as the remnants of a demon god, no matter how far it had fallen it was still part of a god. With such high status, defeating it should have given at least several thousand Adventure EXP to match its identity. He never expected it to actually lose him, Mora. Nolan felt genuinely wounded by this, a scar upon his soul. End of chapter. Chapter 61, Precious Treasure Chest. Bennett stuck his long sword into the ground, using it to prop up his nearly exhausted body. Breathing heavily, he happily said, "We finally eliminated it, so tiring." Continuously channeling pyro energy into his sword for a long time was no simple feat. If it weren't for the descent onto the Teyvat continent consuming too much power, this remnant of the old era, the power of this princess's breath could have obliterated it. Fiscal withdrew her weapon, then crossed her hands on her slightly raised chest. Her lips opened slightly, exhaling a trace of hot breath, indicating significant exhaustion. There were too many dark mists, and their attacks were mainly used to disperse and consume them. Surprisingly, dealing with the demon god's grudge was relatively easy. Unfortunately, it disappeared so cleanly, leaving nothing behind. Nolan still wore a disappointed expression. Of the three, only he was still in good condition since the pyro arrows didn't require him to gather elemental power, just drew the bowstring and fired. Now that our main objective on the third layer has been achieved, let's continue searching for any other potential threats nearby before leaving. Nolan turned his head left and right, thinking and suggesting. As the demon god's remains was cleared, the dark mist gradually dispersed, and the surroundings brightened. The Abyss Order had prepared extensively for this plot, lacking only an Abyss Herald personally guarding this sealed land. But it was too busy to spare the effort, better to just charge into Mondstadt and wreak havoc directly. So there shouldn't be any backup plans left in this secret realm. Of course, that was just speculation. To truly confirm they still had to thoroughly investigate. After resting for a while, they began exploring the third layer of this secret realm. After a thorough search, they found that this place wasn't too large. Besides the demon god's remnant, there were no other monsters. "Hey, look over there, a pile of rubble." Bennett pointed ahead and said. A rubble pile wasn't strange, but it was oddly situated amidst the orderly stone tile flooring and brick walls of this underground palace-like environment. This kind of situation was not unfamiliar to Nolan, when he encountered this kind of sudden pile of rocks while adventuring on the Teyvat map, and if broke it up, there would probably be something hidden inside. Things like torch mechanism, elemental monuments, spirits, treasure chests, or even the entrance to a ruined secret realm, etc., anything was possible. Let's go break it and see, Nolan felt somewhat expectant. After toiling away in the third layer, could they finally gain some harvest? Such trivial matters are not suitable for this princess to handle. Fiscal stood to Nolan's right. Between the uneven suspender straps of her thigh-high stockings and her skirt hem peeked the soft snow-white skin of her left thigh. The shiny leather straps connecting her dress to the stockings' tops prevented them from slipping down. As an archer, breaking rebel piles was difficult for her. Better to use geo attacks or heavy two-handed weapons. Although these were not available to everyone, using a one-handed sword could also break piles of rocks, but it was a bit of a pain in the ass. Fortunately, Nolan had a dull blade, and the two of them could break it fairly quickly together. After about a minute, the two successfully shattered the pile of rubble. Nolan felt that his sword had worn out quite a bit. A somewhat useless sword. It's a precious treasure chest, Bennett said excitedly. Hidden within the rubble was a chest with golden borders, clearly indicating its high value. Just as Bennett stepped forward to pull it from the rubble, he slipped on the broken stones. Losing control, his body tipped forward. As expected, his unfortunate constitution had activated again. Nolan reacted quickly, grabbing Bennett by the collar and preventing his fall. Phew, that was dangerous, hee, thanks. Bennett stood back up, smiling awkwardly. It seems he was used to these occasional bouts of bad luck. We actually found a rare precious treasure chest, let's see what's inside. Nolan also smiled, looking at the chest. Bennett nodded, going to retrieve the precious chest and placing it on the empty, flat ground. The three of them gazed heatedly at the precious treasure chest. This princess has opened one before, so I'll leave this to you two, Fiscal said with a smile on her fair face. Bennett, you just had some bad luck moments ago, so now should be the luckiest time for you. Go ahead. Nolan didn't mind who opened it, as he was used to being the one left disappointed by the world every day. Really? Can I really open it? Bennett, as an adventurer, was undoubtedly happiest when it came to opening treasure chests. And precious treasure chests like these were rare for him due to his unlucky nature. Now he had the chance to open it himself. Bennett was moved to the point of tears. Like a girl primping herself in the morning before going out, he kept fiddling with the chest lid, reluctant to open it. Nolan and the princess couldn't help but wear expressions of silent amusement. Eventually, Bennett opened the precious treasure chest as they anticipated. Wow, as usual, there was a dazzling pile of golden mora, totaling over 60,000. And then, to Nolan's great delight, actual primo gems. Pink azure, super cute, and a full 5 of them. Nolan's heart thumped rapidly, like being stirred by a cute girl. Suppressing his excitement, he looked to see what else was in the treasure chest. There was an object emitting a faint purple light, resembling a teapot. Undoubtedly, it was a 4-star artifact, most likely a goblet of Aonodhem. The specific bonus was still unknown. Having a 4-star artifact in front overshadowed the last 3-star artifact in the eyes of the three. After all, a 4-star artifact was the highest grade artifact a treasure chest could yield, even a luxurious treasure chest. Ha ha ha, a great harvest. Bennett couldn't contain his laughter anymore. This was a loot he had never experienced in his adventures before. Cough, while it cannot be denied that these items are treasures in the eyes of this princess, as the attendant of this princess, how can you disregard your image like this? Fiscal's right eye, not covered by the black eye patch, sparkled with starlight. She then lightly cleared her throat, trying to maintain her royal demeanor while peeking at Nolan from time to time. But her occasional side glances didn't escape Nolan's notice at all. All right, gaining these treasures makes the trip worthwhile. Let's head back. Nolan slowly calmed his excitement and said. It was getting late, and outside still lurked that fearsome Lawachurl. He wondered if Ounce had brought back support yet. Chapter 62, Cyrus's Commendation. As Nolan and his companions walked back up the winding stairs leading to the second layer, a black raven with night-colored wings descended, flapping its wings. Upon noticing the group, they immediately stopped, and the airflow carried by the crow's descent tousled their hair. Oh my, everything going smoothly for you, I presume. The princess's familiar crow, Ounce, flapped its wings as if nothing had happened and inquired. Ounce. Fiscal's golden hair fluttered, revealing her fair forehead and the black eye patch. She used her right hand to tidy her hair and looked somewhat displeased at her familiar. Apologies, miss. Ounce apologized for its impolite behavior. In truth he had mainly been worried about his young miss, so flew a bit hastily. Fortunately, everything has been resolved. Nolan didn't pay much attention and lightly tapped his head, continuing, Ounce, how's the situation outside? Bennett was also curious, looking at Ounce. Since Ounce had come, the Lawachurl must have been tied up fighting the Adventurers Guild reinforcements, unable to properly guard the entrance, right? Ounce, who was flying with his wings, also didn't beat around the bush. Things went smoothly on my end too. When Branch Master Cyrus heard a powerful Lawachurl was discovered, he just laughed and said it was good practice for the juniors. Then he brought several strong adventurers to easily take care of it. That quickly. Nolan felt a little surprised, thinking they could still participate in defeating the Lawachurl after getting back to the second layer. It seems he had overthought things. That made sense, an adventurer's guild this large surely wouldn't lack the strength to deal with a single Lawachurl. Although Nolan felt some regret missing out on the Adventure EXP from defeating the Lawachurl, thinking of the treasure chest's harvest just now he felt satisfied again, no longer feeling it a pity. Next, they all returned to the second layer together. The Lawachurl lay motionless in front of the entrance, still emitting some burnt black smoke. Its prided geo armor was shattered, the domineering bone mask fused with geo elements on its face also smashed apart. The powerful adventurers who came to subjugate the Lawachurl seemed to have left, leaving only the Vice Guild Master, Mr. Cyrus, with his lion-like golden mane and a monocle clipped over his right eye. He held his robust arms around his body, looking at Nolan and his group with a smile. Haha, brats, well done. Challenging a king wandering among the 1,000 peaks at such a young age, you're only a little worse than I was back in the day. Ah, how could we compare with Master Cyrus, we were almost beaten flat. Bennett said happily, fingers touching the goggles on his head. Clearly, he was delighted to have his adventuring courage recognized. Humph, just a mere hilly churl, unworthy of my hands. Fiscal placed her fair hand on her vision, as if hinting she had held back. She selectively didn't mention her earlier experience of being chased by that mere hilly churl. Fortunately, her reliable attendant was there, otherwise the famed Princess Fiscal returning to the Adventurers Guild would surely have lost all dignity, becoming a laughing stock. Thinking of this, Fiscal couldn't help feeling some affection again towards the reliable attendant by her side. Fiscal has developed good feeling towards you, obtained 150 affection points. Current affection level, LV.5, 55/500. Looking at the sudden increase in affection, Nolan fell silent for a moment. Perhaps little Amy inexplicably imagined some shining point he didn't know about. Greetings Master Cyrus, Nolan politely greeted. Noticing the young unfamiliar face, Cyrus stroked his golden sideburns considering for a bit before saying. Oh? You must be that new adventurer Catherine mentioned who discovered this secret realm, aren't you? Not bad, you even went with unlucky Benny here and little Fiscal to the second and third layers this time, haha. And it seems you've also dealt with the abyssal remnants the Abyss Order brought out. Looking at it like this, you're not far from becoming the next rising star adventurer of some renown. I've got high hopes for you. Branch Master Cyrus evaluated Nolan very highly, leaving him a little embarrassed. Indeed, to become Branch Master of Mondstadt's Adventurers Guild, he surely was no simple man. Perhaps a legendary adventurer of the past. Completing top-tier commissions more than once, slaying 3 evil dragons, wiping out 2 international bandit groups, and even saving all of Teyvat before. Yet to this lion-like figure, those unbelievable feats were insignificant happenings, side results hardly worth mentioning. Of course, this was something he said when he was drunk, so its authenticity is uncertain. However, as the branch master of the Adventurers Guild, even if there's some exaggeration, it wouldn't be too far off. Perhaps it was because Mondstadt had many powerful experts like him that the Abyss Order with its convenient teleportation network didn't dare personally act recklessly here. If they did, perhaps they wouldn't even have time to open a teleportation portal. Oh no, Mr. Cyrus, you're too kind. It's everyone's contribution, and I've just done a little insignificant effort. Nolan certainly didn't dare to truly believe that all those contributions were his own. Without Bennett and Fiscal, he wouldn't say whether he could have found the second layer of the secret realm. Even if he did, he might have fled upon encountering the Abyss Mages. Haha, modesty is a good quality. The former legendary adventurer, Cyrus, expressed his appreciation once again, then continued with a smile. Let's go together. Your achievements this time are remarkable. It wouldn't be right to not boast a bit in front of everyone when you return to the camp. Mr. Cyrus seems to be someone who doesn't bother with trivial matters. Before leaving, Nolan collected the Lawachurl's shattered geo-infused bone mask. Later he would need elemental potions for elemental attacks. If he had to research and learn it himself, it would cost a lot of Adventure EXP. He still had levels up, and his swordsmanship skills hadn't improved much. So if he could delegate it to reduce Adventure EXP costs, all the better. According to his earlier thoughts, he could leave the potions to the alchemists. And Miss Sucrose, student and assistant to Chief Alchemist Albedo of the Knights of Favonius, was perfect. She was very interested in all kinds of strange bones. So using the Lawachurl's bone mask as payment, Sucrose would surely be happy to help make elemental potions for him. While thinking this, they had already returned to where the Abyss Mages were defeated. Nolan recalled he hadn't harvested their materials yet. Although the gains were plentiful already, he couldn't waste the little things either. For common hilly churls, the useful material was the bone masks on their heads. For Midachurls, the horns were also useful. The Lawachurl had horns too, but the adventurers who defeated it took those already. As for the Abyss Mages, the useful things on them were actually the ley line branch wands in their hands, also very useful for weapon enhancement or alchemy. After a while, before the sky completely darkened, Nolan and his group finally left the secret realm, exited the ruins, and returned to the camp. At this moment, the notification sound from the character panel sounded again. End of chapter. Chapter 63, Monster Slayer. That voice was so pleasing to the ear, and familiar words emerged. It was just another unremarkable day as you embarked on an adventure into the abyssal domain with the adventurer burdened by the curse of worldly calamity, and the princess who rules over ashen darkness. At the beginning of your adventure, you cleverly used the power of misfortune to choose the right path for exploration. Your team quickly encountered a treasure chest and easily defeated the guardian. However, under the influence of misfortune, you unexpectedly fell to the second level and encountered formidable opponents. With excellent coordination, you narrowly and dangerously succeeded in defeating the enemies. The adventuring team moved forward once again. You contemplated using the power of misfortune once more, but whether misfortune would strike or not, it doesn't depend on changing choices, it naturally follows you. You encountered the more dangerous Abyss Order, but with your powerful strength and clever tactics, you successfully defeated them and uncovered the conspiracy in the secret realm. Later, facing the wandering king of the Hilly Churls mobs, you knew you couldn't overpower him directly. Using a strategy to divert him, you eventually discovered the demon god's remains intent on revival. This abyssal demon god was killed by a human powerhouse, and its lingering grudge held inextinguishable hatred towards mankind. If allowed to fully revive, it would surely seek vengeance, but you and your companions prevented this from happening. It's been a day filled with wondrous adventures. The history you've experienced and created will be remembered, and a character's specialty is taking shape. Please wait a moment. Scenes of this adventure flashed in his mind, finding treasure chests, meeting the ruin hunter, defeating the Abyss Mages, luring away the Lawachurl, cleansing the demon god's remains. As the reminiscence concluded, all the history began to converge and anchor on Nolan. You have gained a new character specialty, Monster Slayer. It was expected that this adventure would meet the criteria for acquiring a new specialty, especially after dealing with the potential threat of the demon god's remnants and disrupting the Abyss Order's plot. The effect of monster is that when Nolan attacks any monster, all attacks receive a small damage bonus. This is probably due to defeating many monsters during this adventure. Overall, it's not bad. Although the bonus isn't significant, it applies to various types of damage, physical or elemental. Nolan and his team looked around the camp, where adventurer tents were set up everywhere. Some tents even had stoves outside, wafting the aroma of mushrooms and meat. It seemed many adventuring teams planned to spend the night at the Thousand Wines Temple camp. This was indeed the norm for adventurers. Going back and forth takes time and is troublesome. The treasures in the secret realm won't wait, and if someone else grabs them first, they're lost. Confident adventurer teams may even camp directly in the secret realm, exploring until they reach a satisfying conclusion. After all, the secret realm is vast, and you can't explore it today and retreat, only to return tomorrow. The time spent on the round trip is not insignificant. Branch Master Cyrus brought Nolan's group to the Adventurers Guild outpost, where many people busied about. Most were intelligence officers gathering information from all over, keeping up with the latest secret realm situation. That way, if any adventurers met danger, they could provide emergency aid at the first moment. This outpost also served as a temporary medical station. Indeed, several injured adventurers were there, heads lowered in embarrassment with bandages exposing their sorry states. Expressions shifty and awkward. Getting injured on the first day of exploring the secret realm, they had to temporarily halt their exploration journey. If others found out, it would indeed be a bit embarrassing. Perhaps they might be labeled as rookie adventurers. Those who got injured this quickly were usually inexperienced newcomers, such as hastily running towards a treasure chest without paying attention to the ground, tripping over, and falling, or losing in a confrontation with small-sized slimes due to neglecting obvious traps. There are all kinds of ridiculous and funny reasons. Certainly, things unexpectedly happened even with seniors around, and what else could be said except inexperienced? Hey? Jack, how come you're here too? Bennett saw a familiar figure and called out. Wasn't this a member of his Benny's adventure team? No. Not at all. Captain Bennett, you've got the wrong person. There's no Jack here. Wearing a green adventurer outfit with a bandage wrapped around his head, the rookie adventurer Jack swiftly ran away like the wind. He didn't expect to still have such awful luck even after leaving the Benny's adventure team. And now got seen by someone familiar in this sorry state. Jack felt utterly awkward thinking to himself. What's up with him? Bennett had a confused expression, scratching his head. That brat Jack, during the exploration stepped in some monster droppings, got spooked, and fell down hitting his forehead. Ha ha ha. Cyrus guffawed without restraint, mercilessly exposing Jack's embarrassing moment. The other injured also chuckled, although their reasons were a bit better than that. Oh my, how unlucky indeed, Ounce casually remarked. Sigh, I've experienced that before too, Bennett seemed to recall something, empathizing a little with Jack. The reason the branch master laughed was to make these rookie adventurers remember this lesson. Otherwise, being reckless next time might not guarantee a safe return. Afterwards, Cyrus boasted loudly to the Adventurers Guild members about Nolan and the others' deeds, and then, he rewarded each of them with 150,000 mora for discovering the second and third layers of the secret realm. Not much, but it was the Guild's commendation for outstanding adventurers. After that, Nolan and his team left the Thousand Wines Temple camp and returned to Mondstadt before nightfall. On the way, they distributed the spoils. Firstly, they had gained 6 primogems from this adventure, worth around 600,000 mora, one of which Nolan already used. More precious was the 4-star artifact. There were also some 3-star, 2-star, and 1-star artifacts, chaos devices, chaos circuits, broken masks, mora, and so on. Nolan only took the 5 primogems and the Lawachurl's broken mask, already about 1/3 of the total value. He didn't feel right taking more. Fiscal and Bennett didn't find his fondness for the shiny, valuable primogems strange at all. Many people liked them after all. Since today was a fruitful day, they decided to go to the Good Hunter restaurant to celebrate with a feast. After all, how could adventurers not celebrate when they found treasure? It wasn't until late that Nolan bid farewell to Fiscal and Bennett, returning to his home in Mondstadt's Valberry Street. They agreed to venture into the secret realm together again in a few days, and tomorrow would be a day for proper rest. Nolan also had to prepare elemental potions to gain more attacking options. Chapter 64, Choice. It was late at night, the moon was hidden and the stars were dim. Nolan pushed open the iron gate of the small courtyard and stepped into the deserted yard. He boiled some hot water with firewood, washed away the fatigue after the adventure, and returned to the room to sit on the bed padded with a layer of quilts. Then he took out the 5 primogems. Discover a large amount of adventure EXP, would you like to absorb? Nolan lay down, the back of his head sinking into the soft quilts in an instant. He raised his hand, looking at the primogems that he couldn't grasp in one palm, and thus fell on his chest, silently outlined a faint smile on his face. These were his greatest gains of the day. Absorb. As he made his choice, the elemental stones disappeared from his hand one by one. A prompt popped up on the panel. Illuminated by the light of dreams and hopes, obtain 3000*5 Adventure EXP. Adventure EXP, 15,121. More than 15,000 Adventure EXP. Nolan had never been so rich before. As for how to use them, there was no doubt that he would directly increase his level to 21st. As his body became stronger, even throwing stones would become irresistible. Adventure EXP -8927. LV.14, 973/1400. LV.20, 0/2000. An extremely massive stream of heat flowed into his body, fundamentally nourishing and enhancing every cell of Nolan's, and they welcomed their rebirth every moment. Leveling up was instantaneous, but the aftertaste left him needing a few seconds to calm down slightly. He looked again at the new prompt brushed out on the character panel. Your level has been raised to LV.20, your evolution has reached a new stage, and you can obtain a racial specialty, please choose. Level 20. According to Nolan's understanding of the character panel, it was actually the same as using character EXP materials like Wanderer's Advice or Hero's Wit in the game to raise a character to level 20 to the first breakthrough point. Only he just didn't need to collect any materials for the breakthrough. When it came, very convenient. In this real Teyvat, the growth systems of various creatures were actually no different from the original work. Through training, adventuring, absorbing certain energies, and other means, people could obtain strength improvements. When growth reached a certain level, they would encounter a limit, which was the ascend in the game. At this time, materials that resonated with oneself and contained abundant elemental energy needed to be collected and absorbed, in order to ascend one's own body. For example, as the holder of the Pyro Vision, Bennett needed pyro-related materials to break through his own limits and continue to grow. Absorbing elemental materials used for breaking through was very dangerous for ordinary people without a vision, and they might die from elemental erosion before successfully breaking through their limit. This was also the reason why vision holders were called allogenes. They could break through one limit after another until they rivaled the gods. Although this process was not simple either, and there were very few who could truly ascend to godhood. The so-called limit was just something yet to be discovered, like the methods that vision holders could use to break through one limit after another. This was not a restriction or blockade imposed by the world's rules on ordinary beings, rather, individual races themselves had physiological limits that, after reaching a certain point, no amount of training would be effective. Therefore, higher-level elemental energy nourishment was needed to strengthen oneself in order to continue growing. But there were always exceptions to everything. Some people could slay monsters twice as strong as themselves relying solely on peerless martial arts. Others could learn fairy magic, talismans, spells, secrets and other extraordinary powers to bypass racial limits and continue growing. This way of growing was undoubtedly much more difficult and rare compared to vision holders. Nolan's advantage was that he only needed Adventure EXP. He didn't need to consider the problem of how to break through at all, which greatly shortened the time for him to grow stronger. He looked at the 3 racial specialties floating in front of him and carefully considered which one to choose. All resistance, the strong body has greater resistance to all kinds of damage including physical and elemental. Abundant life, slight increase in self-healing speed, slight increase in stamina and spirit recovery speed, and adds extra lifespan. Infinite strength, your physical strength far surpasses your peers. Racial specialties are different from character specialties. They generally provide additional bonuses related to one's own body. Why can't I have them all? Having to choose one and give up the other 2, it really hurts. Nolan gazed at the 3 racial specialties with great enthusiasm. Choosing all resistance would make his body stand out and seem more comprehensive in terms of defense. But the bonus was probably not much, because the 3 racial specialties offered equal value, just improving in different areas. Compared to abundant life or infinite strength, it seemed so comprehensive, yet under the balance, the improvement would inevitably not be very high. If there was some accident, he would still get hurt the same. If he chose infinite strength, the degree of improvement in strength should be good, after all, its description was so simple and straightforward. Unfortunately, its functionality was too singular, and Nolan's strength was already sufficient, he didn't need it to further enhance at the moment. So in the end, Nolan chose abundant life. Unlike all resistance, it didn't need to face an attack to show its effect. The improved recovery speeds could demonstrate its usefulness at all times, plus there was an extra lifespan bonus. Overall, Nolan was more inclined to choose it. The moment abundant life was selected, Nolan felt his body seemed to be filled with inexhaustible energy, and his spirit was the same, becoming less prone to fatigue. Even when tired, he could recover quickly. As for the improved self-healing, he didn't know the specific effects yet. It would be best to never find out, since he didn't want to get injured. Nolan happily lay on the bed and turned over, looking at the remaining more than 6,000 Adventure EXP, he could still raise his level by about 2 more, better leave it for the skills. Whether it was level or skill improvement, both could strengthen his abilities, so skills couldn't be neglected either. And he had always been curious about what kind of effect the fusion of 2 max-level skills of the same type would have. Hey, Nolan let out a breath without hesitation. Adventure EXP -4400. In an instant, Favonius Archery, Fundamental, went from LV.20/200 to LV.10, Advanced Stability/Fusible. Any skill reaching max level wouldn't be weak. The extraordinary feature of Favonius Archery, Fundamentals at max level was to give arrows extremely high stability. It suited the meaning of fundamental archery very much. Its effect was to make the fired arrows less susceptible to environmental interference, able to remain as steady as a rock even in fierce winds. Overall it was pretty good. Nolan continued tapping fuse, and the character panel popped up the two skills that could be fused. They were Favonius Archery, Fundamentals LV.10, Advanced Stability/Fusible, and Hunter's Archery LV.10, Silent Shadow/Fusible. After selecting Confirm, Nolan watched as they distorted and intertwined, merging together. Finally, new words emerged. Favonius Hunter's Archery LV.10, Advanced Stability, Silent Shadow/Fusible. A/N, the description of the original Genshin Impact upgrade system in the first part of this chapter should be as faithful as possible to the original work. Everyone can discuss more in the comments. If there are very good suggestions, just put here this comment in respect of author Sama. Chapter 65, Sucrose. Fusing into a new skill didn't make Nolan forget the previous old skills. It just meant he had learned a new technique to apply them simultaneously. Shooting an arrow with two extraordinary characteristics at the same time. The level of the new skill didn't decrease, it was still at max level and fusionable. In the future, he could continue to fuse other archery skills. Nolan inexplicably thought, would there be a day in the future when he could shout, "This shot pierces through the stars," when he drew his bow? Thinking too far ahead. Name, Nolan. Level, LV.20, 0/2000. Race, human. Title, none. Innate talent, entangling affection. Skills, Favonius Hunter's Archery LV.10, Advanced Stability, Silent Shadow, Stealth Assassination LV.4, 0/400, Martial Arts LV.2, 0/200, Favonius Swordsmanship, Noble LV.1, 2/100, Favonius Swordsmanship, Fundamentals LV.1, 1/100. Specialties, Descender, Maiden Savior, Monster Slayer, Abundant Life. Adventure EXP, 1794. Nolan glanced at the character panel that had changed significantly. From over 15,000 experience points, there were suddenly only over 1,700 left. As expected, wealth never lasted long. After a while, Nolan calmed down a bit from the excitement in his heart. Listening to the night insects under the moon outside, he flipped the quilt over himself and entered rest mode. Morning. The melodious song of a blue thrush woke Nolan up. He got up lazily, washed up, made some noodles casually, finished breakfast, and then headed out. He brought the recipes for the 2 elemental potions he obtained from the treasure hoarders, and came to the area near the crafting bench. There was a resident alchemist here named Teyvat, who seemed to be an assistant to Mondstadt's chief alchemist, just like Sucrose. So asking him should help him find Sucrose. In principle, Teyvat also knew basic alchemy, just not as profound. But those simple elemental potions of the treasure hoarders should be no problem for him. So asking for his help was feasible as well. However, if he had to trouble others to craft elemental potions, then the material costs and labor fees would of course require more for payment. But if he asked Sucrose for help, he could use the shattered mask of the Geostonehide Lawachurl as a reward. After all, Miss Sucrose liked researching bones. This somewhat strange and bizarre hobby was known to everyone in Mondstadt. Hello there. Nolan greeted the young man tinkering with strange bottles and jars behind the crafting bench. Hearing the voice, Teyvat also came to his senses and looked in that direction. He saw a little youth dressed as an adventurer, and responded. Hello, are you here to borrow the crafting bench? Please go ahead. The bench was set up near the streets for convenient public use, especially for adventurers. They had all kinds of weird materials. If needed, they could use the bench to simply combine some common low-star materials into high-star ones. No, I found some rare bones during my adventures, and wanted to ask her to craft some elemental potions for me. Nolan held the mask fragments of the Geostonehide Lawachurl in his hand. Wait. This thickness, the color, it seems to contain the power of Geo element, could it be a Lawachurl? Teyvat looked at the fragment of the mask in Nolan's hand, his eyes widening slightly, exclaiming in surprise. Can someone really defeat such a monster? Timaeus stood up and took the mask fragments from Nolan's hand, carefully examining them. It wasn't me who defeated it, but some senior adventurers from the Adventurers Guild. I just picked up the broken bones they left behind. Nolan said with a smile. Ah, I see. Timaeus nodded as he touched the mask fragment with his thumb. Indeed, it's a type of bone infused with geo-element. If you want to ask Miss Sucrose for help with it, I'm sure she'll be delighted. After thinking for a bit, Timaeus returned the bone mask fragments to Nolan and continued saying. Wait here, I'll go to the lab and bring her over. Thanks for the trouble. Nolan took the fragments back and nodded in gratitude. Timaeus left the crafting bench. After a while, a green-haired girl came jogging over breathlessly, with Timaeus following closely behind as well. Sucrose arrived in front of Nolan, her gloved hands pressing against her knees wrapped in light black stockings, breathing heavily with her head down. Her round glasses slid down to the tip of her fair nose, almost falling off. As an alchemist, engrossed in alchemy day in and day out, her physical fitness was only average, making her breathless from running so fast. Miss Sucrose, are you all right? It wasn't strange for Nolan to directly call out Sucrose's name, since she had some fame in Mondstadt. In addition to her role as the head alchemist's assistant, she was also known for her bioalchemy works and her peculiar behavior of collecting bones. I am fine. While pushing the glasses that had slid off her nose back up, Sucrose still spoke a bit breathlessly as she looked at Nolan expectantly and asked, May I please see the lawatural bones? Usually reticent, she also unexpectedly showed a less shy side when encountering these rare bones. Of course, no problem. Nolan entered the crafting bench area and found a table to place the collected mask fragments on. Thick, rocky hue, large and small pieces scattered in a pile. Sucrose leaned in closely, her face with round glasses very close, her gloved fingers picking up one of the larger bones in coordination. Her amber-like eyes sparkled like stars. Timaeus also came over to examine the lawatural mask bones again. How is it, Miss Sucrose? Are these lawatural bones? After all, Timaeus didn't research bones, so he asked the expert's opinion. Sucrose wore a hat with golden patterns. Amidst her green hair, the front had some silver-white highlights resembling bleaching. She nodded, then shook her head and said. These mask fragments are indeed bone, and contain abundant geo-element. They should be from a lawatural, no doubt. But the mask worn on the lawatural's head wasn't naturally grown, but made from other creatures' bones and worn on top. Then when that midatural became a lawatural, the increased geo-element in its body fused with it, ending up like this. Nolan was momentarily stunned, thinking carefully, and it did seem to make sense. He asked. So to say, it wasn't originally part of the geostonehide lawatural's body. Hearing Nolan's words, Sucrose came out of research mode, seemingly a bit shy as she haltingly said. Why yes, but it fused with geo-element, so it's still bones worth researching very much. So, if you need anything, I'll definitely try my best to help you. Sucrose has developed good feelings towards you, obtained 120 affection points, current affection level LV.2, 20/200. T/N, okay, here is the thing, I thought I had scheduled enough chapters for this week but it seems I made a mistake in the date, so anyways, just want to tell you that from now there will be 6 chap/week, yes sorry no extra 2/3 chapters from now on. I really can't make it guys. I have to go early and return late at night cause of traveling, and you know I'm human too, I too feel tired. I haven't even uploaded on RR and SH, cause of lack of time. Enough of my rambling. If this story made into the top 3 ranking I will consider uploading an extra chapter. Now, praise me, mortals. Hehe anyways if anyone wants to support and read ahead feel free to join my Patreon. Ta-ta. Take care, guys. See. Chapter 66, Material Collection. Having said it all in one breath, a slight blush emerged on Sucrose's fair face. Her hands were clasped behind her back as her gaze lowered to the ground in the right corner. It's not a big deal really. I have 2 simple elemental potion recipes here. If possible, could I trouble Miss Sucrose to help craft some bottles? Nolan let out a breath of relief. He had thought the mask bones were worthless. He handed the elemental potion recipes to Sucrose. When it came to academic matters, Sucrose quickly shifted from her usual awkwardness in social situations and carefully examined the elemental potion recipes. She lowered her head, seemed to be pondering. The short skirt Sucrose wore seemed somewhat similar to Fiscal's. Both wore a black bodysuit underneath, with an open front short skirt layered on top, exposing a bit of the bodysuit around the midriff. The difference was Sucrose's bodysuit looked a little thicker in the fabric. And the butt area wasn't Fiscal's triangular type, more like a square-cut bodysuit with serrated edges. Beneath the black bodysuit were sheer black knee-high stockings that covered her legs, with symmetrical leather suspenders attached to the sides of her snow-white thighs. On her feet were broad-collared white short boots, angled modestly inwards. 3 minutes passed. Sucrose lifted her head and pushed up the round half-rimmed glasses from the side. Looking at Nolan she said, "These 2 elemental potions aren't difficult, I can make them." Timaeus, do you have any pyro flowers left? I used up the ones in the lab." Sucrose looked somewhat embarrassed asking Timaeus beside her. "Pyro flowers? Let me think." Timaeus rubbed his chin, trying to remember, then suddenly realized, it seems like the pyro flowers I had here were used up a couple of days ago too. Isn't that unfortunate?" Nolan looked somewhat surprised. "How about we make electro-elemental potions instead?" Although with only the electro potion he couldn't trigger overload with the pyro one. But for Nolan who had no elemental attacks, it was enough for now. After all, with only physical attacks, monsters with high physical resistance would be more troublesome. The electro crystals were also used by me for an experiment on how electro element affects Sunsetia growth. Sucrose's fair face blushed slightly as she looked away at the ground. Nolan was at a loss for words for a moment. Haha. Seeing the awkward situation, Timaeus laughed twice to ease the atmosphere. But it's fine, I was going to the Stormbearer Mountains anyway to dig up some sunset TIAs for my experiment. I can look for pyro flowers at the same time. I should be able to make the potions for you by this evening. Last night when Sucrose was experimenting with how electro element affected Sunsetia growth, she had failed to control the electro crystal's electro emission, resulting in instantly electrocuting several experimental sunset TIAs all at once. So she did need to find some more later. Otherwise, she wouldn't be able to continue with her bioalchemy project. Going to Stormbearer Mountains to collect materials? Miss Sucrose, why don't I accompany you? After all, it's helping me, I'd feel bad letting you work too hard. Since there were no materials, there was no other way. Besides, he was planning to take a break today, so why not go on a little outing? Hearing Nolan's words, Sucrose's fair face showed some surprise. She lowered her head pondering. The Stormbearer Mountains were huge with many sunset TIAs, so they were easy to find. But plants like pyro flowers were mostly only abundant in places rich with pyro element. Elsewhere they grew sporadically, and were indeed hard to find. An extra person meant extra help. Thus, Sucrose gently nodded. Her amber eyes blinked as she said, then I'll have to trouble you, Mr. Adventurer. No trouble at all, I'm helping myself after all. So when do we set off? Nolan first shook his head, then smiled and asked. I can go anytime. Sucrose clenched her fists as if pumping herself up. Then seemingly feeling she was acting a bit strange, her face flushed slightly as she looked away at the ground and softly added, if you're also ready. Nolan was already used to her occasional fidgety behavior. Then let's go now. Nolan didn't have a vision to conveniently store things. All he could prepare was a bow and a sword. At most, he could bring along an adventuring backpack with some healing potions and snacks, or it would be inconvenient during the journey. Oh right, young adventurer and Miss Sucrose, Timaeus seemed to recall something and said, I happened to run out of berries recently. If you happen to come across any, could you help me collect some? He put his hands together in a pleading gesture. No problem at all. Nolan smiled and nodded lightly. Berries were very common plants, not hard to find. It wasn't much trouble to do in passing. All right, Timaeus, are you still researching that dying topic? Sucrose pushed up her round half-rimmed glasses from the left side. Her slightly drooping furry green ears twitched lightly. Recently Timaeus had been researching a method to make berry juice dye last longer without fading. It was a minor research topic assigned by Professor Albedo. Using berry juice for dyeing was very common, it just tended to fade easily. Yeah, but I already have some clues. I'll be able to finish this topic soon. Timaeus happily said. Congratulations, Timaeus. Sucrose clapped and smiled. Haha, still got a long way to go. Timaeus raised his hand and scratched the back of his head. Nolan also clapped along. Later Sucrose stored away the shattered mask fragments of the Geolawachurl, and left a piece for Timaeus to research when he had time, since there were quite a lot. Let's go. Sucrose looked at the young adventurer with great interest, then her fair face blushed slightly as she shyly looked away again. Nolan understood that Sucrose wasn't shy because she was introverted but because she felt that social interactions involved too much politeness and emotions, which was more troublesome than researching projects. So, she developed this seemingly introverted and shy behavior as a way to avoid it. Without further chatter, the two left the city gates, crossed the Mondstadt Bridge, and headed in the direction of Stormbearer Mountains. Stormbearer Mountains wasn't a very dangerous area. Some time ago Draff had brought him here to hunt wild beasts when they were rampant. There were relatively fewer monsters here. At most some non-threatening slimes, and some hilly churls who liked robbing goods. Plus the Knights of Favonius patrolled regularly. So it was quite suitable for teaching new adventurers outdoor survival skills, or getting used to the wilderness. Chapter 67, Burden. After passing through the dim, silent environment of Whispering Woods, if you continued right along the road, you would see Starfell Lake. But Nolan and Sucrose were headed for Stormbearer Mountains. They needed to leave the main road and continue straight ahead. This area was all uneven hill terrain, sometimes requiring climbing. Just like the current situation. Nolan jumped and grabbed onto the protruding surface of the upper layer of the mountain wall, then used the strength of his arms to pull himself up. Once he climbed up, Nolan turned back and reached out his hand to Sucrose still below. "Ah, thank you." Sucrose hurriedly tiptoed and stretched her hand up. The first time she didn't grab hold, their fingers just brushed. A slight blush crept onto her face, and her gaze unconsciously drifted to the nearby rock wall for less than a second before she regained her composure to try again. With her legs clad in thigh-high stockings that revealed a hint of skin tone, Sucrose slightly bent her knees and jumped. Her glasses slid down slightly, but she managed to catch Nolan's outstretched hand successfully this time. Through Sucrose's leather gloves, Nolan could feel the boneless softness of her touch. Just as he was about to pull her up, he suddenly felt his hand empty, leaving only a white glove. Oops! Sucrose plopped down on the grassy ground, both hands propping herself up. Her legs wrapped in light black overknee stockings prominently outlined her knees as they bent together slightly. The round half-frame glasses on her face slid down to the position between her abdomen and legs, fortunately not falling to the ground or getting dirty or breaking the lenses. "Miss Sucrose, are you all right?" Nolan jumped back down, somewhat helplessly. "Sorry for making you laugh." Sucrose groped around her abdomen, found her glasses, put them back on, then stood up, brushed off the dust on her buttocks, placed her hands behind her back, and looked towards the grass on Nolan's left. "How could I?" Nolan didn't have the habit of ridiculing others over such minor things. "Here's your glove." "Ah, thanks." Sucrose took the white glove, but didn't put it on immediately. Seeing her seeming like she had more to say, Nolan could probably guess her meaning. Nolan climbed back up to the ledge and reached his hand out to Sucrose again. This time Sucrose successfully grabbed hold without the slippery glove. Nolan felt the warmth and softness in her bare fair hand even more. The girl's body was light. He easily pulled Sucrose up. "Thank you." Sucrose stood in front of the young adventurer, her head slightly lowered as she spoke softly. "Sucrose has developed good feelings towards you, obtained 90 affection points. Current affection level, LV.2, 110/200. As a vision holder, although she hadn't grown to the first breakthrough level, being engrossed in the vast topic of bioalchemy meant she didn't exercise often, resulting in weaker physical abilities compared to others. But it shouldn't be so bad she couldn't even climb a small cliff. According to common human psychology, most people would try their best to present a good image to friends they just met. So, she was mainly a bit reserved as a girl, which made it difficult for her to let go for a while. But thinking back now to how she was seen falling in an embarrassing manner, Sucrose felt a tinge of anguish inside, feeling it didn't matter anymore. Seeing Sucrose suddenly slump her shoulders and sigh, Nolan was a bit puzzled about what she was fretting over. His gaze then turned to the situation on the mountainside. The ground was covered with short grass, and looking ahead, it seemed like a green wilderness, but it was uneven, with many hills and slopes. Nolan was suddenly attracted by a short tree covered with orange-yellow fruits. Wasn't this the berry that Timaeus wanted? "Miss Sucrose, look, we've found berries," he said with a smile. "Hey!" Sucrose's furry ears, nestled in her green hair, shook inconspicuously. She said with some surprise, "So quickly? We've already found some." They approached together. After a night, the green grass looked very moist, with dewdrops still on some blades, leaving traces of water on Sucrose's white short boots as she brushed against them. Arriving before the orange berries, Nolan examined them carefully. They looked like large fruits made of small orange beads, quite fascinating. 1, 2, 3, 4, great, 4 should be enough for Timaeus for a while. Sucrose squatted down with legs together, the snowy skin exposed at her suspenders slightly obscured by the lotus leaf-like skirt hem. She smiled as she curiously counted the berry tree. "Let's pick them." Although Nolan was a bit tempted to taste the berries, considering these were requested by Timaeus, he decided against it lest there wouldn't be enough. "MMR adventurer, please be careful when picking the berries, don't hurt the tree. It will grow more in the future." Seeing Nolan about to directly pluck the berries from the short tree, Sucrose quickly stopped him. "Oh, all right." Nolan thought the berry tree wouldn't be that fragile, but since Sucrose gave a reminder, he could only move more gently. As a scholar in bioalchemy, she was understandably more sensitive about this. After handing the picked berries to Sucrose, Nolan watched as she made them vanish into particles of light absorbed by her vision. He felt indescribable envy. What is it? Do you want to eat berries?" Seeing Nolan staring motionless at where the now disappeared berries were in her hand, Sucrose thought he was hungry. "No, just a bit curious, how much can visions store?" Nolan stood up, then continued the material collecting journey under Sucrose's lead. With the berry harvest done, all that was left were sunset tias and pyro flower. As an expert in this, Sucrose naturally understood their growth habits. Like berries, sunset tias were also low shrubs. The difference was they generally grew in shaded environments, like under trees or beside bushes. Not as casually found everywhere like berries. Due to these traits, sunset tias weren't hard to find either. Just search around trees or bushes and you'll come across them. While walking, Sucrose answered Nolan's earlier question. How much it can store mainly depends on the item's weight. The stronger you are, the more a vision can hold. For me, having stored my weapon, some lab equipment, flasks containing Mo spirits, water and rations, and leftover space, it's around 10 kilograms total. Hearing her answer, Nolan nodded enviously. He took the initiative to chat with Sucrose about all kinds of questions as they walked, or the atmosphere might turn awkward with her personality. They walked up a slope and suddenly saw some broken stone walls ahead, with wisps of black smoke rising within. Nolan and Sucrose stopped and exchanged a glance, then somewhat curiously walked over. Chapter 68, The Burnt Pot. Mondstadt, Stormbearer Mountains. The grassy fields continued on the sloping hillside. Just ahead was a fault line, and below that was another stretch of grassy plains, on which stood broken grey stone walls. Wisps of black smoke rose from within, carrying the smell of something burnt. "It smells like someone burnt their cooking." "Let's go down and take a look," said Nolan. Having cooked often, he was quite familiar with these smells. "Oh okay," replied Sucrose. Standing atop the cliff's edge, Sucrose's cloak fluttered gently in the mountain breeze like wings. With a light leap forward, her plain wind glider suddenly appeared and unfolded, resembling a gliding bird. Her long green hair tied behind her head was carried up by the airflow, dancing gently as she flew toward the broken stone wall. Nolan had yet to learn how to use wind gliding, so going down wasn't as convenient. He used the vertical cliff face to buffer his descent, simply jumping down before jogging to catch up with Miss Sucrose. Sucrose spread her arms to maintain balance. Her stocking-clad legs relaxed naturally as she softly landed on the grass. Led by curiosity, they walked into the rebel ruins within the broken walls. On the grassy ground lay a paralyzed ruin guard, with a brown-haired girl sitting on its body, her most striking feature being the bunny ears tied on her head. Her long, dark brown hair cascaded down her back, completely covering the red hood on her clothes. In front of the girl were 3 wooden sticks tied together at the top, with an iron pot hanging from them. Inside the pot was boiling black, burnt substance emitting dense black smoke and a choking smell. "Amber!" Nolan and Sucrose both called out in surprise at the same time, then glanced at each other. As a member of the Knights of Favonius, Sucrose naturally knew Amber. "Hey!" Sucrose looked curiously at the young adventurer beside her. It seemed he was not a stranger to Amber either. Upon hearing the sound, the red-haired girl's shoulders suddenly shook, and her bunny ear hairpiece twitching too. Amber stiffly turned her head, her fair face slightly embarrassed, feeling like her little secret had been discovered. She got up slightly, hiding the makeshift stove behind her with hands clasped behind her back. However, the steady plume of black smoke rising vertically, along with the burning firewood visible between her legs, drew attention nonetheless. "It's you guys. What are you doing here?" Amber asked, her gaze flickering toward the side, clearly still concerned about her little secret being discovered by her friends. We came out to collect materials and suddenly, Sucrose hesitated with a slightly weaker voice, glancing at the thick black smoke rising behind Amber. She fidgeted nervously, poking her fingers together, suddenly unsure if she should say it outright. "Ahem, we could smell something burning from dozens of meters away," said Nolan, trying to phrase it more tactfully. "Also, if you keep cooking like that, I'm afraid your pot won't be usable anymore." What? Amber's eyes widened in shock, though it was unclear if it was due to the former or latter statement. Then, with a dejected expression, Amber slumped down her fair face again onto the paralyzed ruin guard, and finally said helplessly, "So you guys found out, hey? It's so obvious, it'd be hard not to notice," Nolan thought to himself. Everyone who had gone on missions with Amber or encountered her in the wilderness knew of her poor cooking skills. Just like how he and Sucrose had found out now. After all, that burnt black smoke could practically serve as a smoke signal. "By the way, Amber, did you come here on patrol?" Nolan and Sucrose helped Amber extinguish the burning firewood under the pot, using the water she carried to wash the charred iron pot. The thing inside could barely be identified as a piece of meat. "You know, not long ago, there was a sudden surge of beasts in the Stormbearer Mountains, right?" Amber put her things away into her vision, immediately regaining her usual cheerful demeanor. Wasn't that over a month ago? When it first happened, the Hunter Chief Draff had brought Nolan to hunt in Stormbearer Mountains and Whispering Woods. Yet, after discovering this situation, the Knights of Favonius investigated and found out that there was an overflow of elemental energy in a certain area of the Stormbearer Mountains, causing nearby plants to grow exceptionally lush. With an abundance of food, naturally many beasts were attracted here. After temporarily dealing with the overflow of elemental energy, the Knights of Favonius suggested that hunters come here to hunt, and the problem of the beasts gradually resolved itself. Amber sat on the rust-colored steel body, her legs stretched out, clad in tight white over-the-knee boots, the metallic solace reflecting a glimmer of light. Leaning slightly forward, with gloved hands resting on her knees, she absent-mindedly stroked her legs. "I see. Since it's been resolved, there shouldn't be any problems, right?" Nolan and Sucrose also found a place to sit on the paralyzed ruin guard to avoid getting their clothes wet from the dew-covered ground. "Yeah, it should have been fine, but yesterday, a comrade from the Knights of Favonius found out that a patch of blue elemental energy blossoms has appeared there now, attracting many monsters. It seems like the previous solution wasn't thorough enough." Amber brought her legs together, and slightly bent her knees, and the white boots showed some wrinkles. She rubbed her calves and said, "Are those blue elemental energy blossoms the ones that absorb their energy and can enhance strength, the Revelation elemental energy blossoms?" Sucrose leaned against the rust-colored steel slightly, her bright eyes fixed on Amber, and she said excitedly, "If elemental energy leaked externally somewhere, rare ley line flowers might sprout." There were generally two types. In Teyvat, the so-called elemental energy blossoms are ley lines. The blue ley line outcrops are called blossoms of revelation while the yellow ley line outcrops are called blossoms of wealth. The blossoms of wealth, which emitted golden mist after blooming and produced mora, which was quite peculiar. The other type was the blue revelation blossom, which released miraculous energy that could be absorbed without side effects, strengthening the body and enhancing one's abilities. As an alchemist specializing in bioalchemy, how could Sucrose not be fascinated by such mystical plants? Were ley line flowers purely energy forms? Or did they have genetic properties? If so, could they be grafted onto other plants, causing those plants to become ley line flowers? Sucrose was curious as hell. "That's right, those ones. If you want to see them, Sucrose, we can head over together," said Amber, smiling. Her bunny ear hairpiece fluttered slightly in the mountain breeze. Chapter 69, Blossoms of Revelation. The Blossom of Revelation, as in the original, is a special plant that can produce experience books to increase character levels. Today, it's the same in Teyvat. You can absorb its released energy to enhance your own strength, provided you defeat the monsters it attracts. I see. Nolan nodded after hearing Amber's explanation. But Amber, if you have a mission, why are you frying meat here? He gave Amber a suspicious look. Could it be that she's neglecting her duty? Hey, what's with that look? Amber angrily waved her fist, feeling like punching someone. She explained, I just happened to pass by here and saw a ruin guard wandering around. To prevent it from hurting passers-by, I dealt with it first. And then, you felt a bit drained and wanted to eat something to replenish your energy, right? Nolan nodded understandingly. It makes sense to also bring some meat ingredients if you are bringing a pot out. Many adventuring teams that explore the wilderness for a long time also bring large adventure backpacks with pots and utensils. That way, when rations run low, they won't have to eat raw meat if they catch prey. Ahem, well, basically that's right. Amber cleared her throat slightly and calmly averted her gaze to continue chatting with Sucrose about the ley line flower blossom. Indeed, the truth often turns out to be quite simple, she was just hungry. Nolan thought to himself somewhat amusedly. Then seeing Sucrose's excitement about the Blossom of Revelation, he wondered if she had already forgotten about collecting materials. Oh well, Nolan himself was also quite curious about the blue ley line blossom anyway. Since the ruin guard had been dealt with and the meat cooking had failed, Amber no longer had a reason to linger here. Sucrose and Nolan decided to follow her to see what was so magical about the Blossom of Revelation. Walking on the soft grass, following Amber all the way, on the way to the flower blossom, they found 2 berry bushes again. These bushes were also full of orange-yellow fruits. Nolan picked them all, finally getting to taste their flavor. The fruits were plump and juicy, and with one bite, the sweet sensation swept away the fatigue from the long journey. After a while, the group arrived at a sparse forest and saw several Enmo slimes floating in the air, playing around the trees. Generally speaking, these monsters would show hostility and attack when spotting other living beings. However, these Enmo slimes showed no reaction when they saw Nolan and the others, just continuing to play by themselves. Facing this situation, it would also not be good for them to attack first. After all, they were not dangerous monsters, and their appearance was so cute. Nolan also had the proper understanding to treat everything correctly, not someone who would recklessly go after enemies for Adventure EXP. Ignoring them, the group walked into the sparse forest. The forest was so sparse that there was no shade from the trees, and the sunlight fell as usual. If there were tree shades, they might have found some sunset TIAs, but now it seemed unlikely. Although that was the case, Nolan still scanned the area with his eyes, searching for any unexpected discoveries. The 2 girls walked in front, their tied-up cyan green long hair and free deep brown hair swayed following the curves of their backs, finally lightly draping over their slightly swaying hips from their legs crossing as they walked. The not-so-scorching sunlight shone the snowy white skin of their legs with a faint glow. After leaving the sparse forest, and with a bit of regret for not finding any sunset TIAs, they saw a blue mist about 20 meters ahead. They were like streams of energy, overflowing outward from a concentrated core of energy. The Blossom of Revelation was under this energy core, spewing ley line energy. As long as this energy core was dispersed, the ley line blossom would emerge from below. The current situation seemed very tranquil. But if you go forward to touch this blue energy core, the dispersed energy will attract nearby monsters. Because the mystical energy released by the blue ley line blossom that can enhance one's strength has the same effect on monsters, so the attraction is not small for them. So going to clear the Blossom of Revelation and resolve the ley line energy overflow is actually quite a dangerous thing. Of course, this is not a big issue for our reconnaissance night here. After all, this is the Stormbearer Mountains, not too dangerous of an area. The monsters attracted by the ley line blossom will most likely not be too strong, which is also why Amber came to handle it herself. You guys be careful, no telling where the monsters will pop out from. Amber placed her left hand on her right shoulder, then twisted her right arm, showing a determined expression on her fair face. The pyro vision at her waist also glimmered slightly. Understood, don't worry. Sucrose pushed up her round half-frame glasses and replied in a somewhat gentle tone. Amber stepped forward, ready to touch the Blossom of Revelation. Nolan took his bow and arrows off his back to prepare for battle. Sucrose also took out a book-like catalyst. These catalysts can greatly increase the elemental attack power of the vision wielders. As soon as Amber's hand touched the blue energy core, they were all absorbed back by the blue ley line blossom underground. As expected, the blossom of revelation would emerge from below soon after. Tiny traces of ley line energy were already seeping out. Just then, 2 large pyro slimes and 4 small pyro slimes were attracted over. Seeing humans here, they immediately attacked without hesitation. One large slime hopped towards Nolan and the others, while the other charged up and spat out fireballs. Being elemental life forms, they could easily use elemental attacks. And they were immune to their own elemental damage type, a very formidable characteristic. At least for now, Nolan's fire-imbued arrows and Amber's pyro attacks were completely useless against them. Their only way to deal with them was with purely physical attacks, such as arrows. Of course, Sucrose's and Mo elemental attacks were also effective. The 3 of them dodged the fireballs from the large pyro slimes. Puffs of smoke landed on the grass, igniting even the dew-covered blades. Nolan fired back with armor-piercing steel arrows, directly piercing through the slime's body. Trickles of orange-yellow pyro liquid oozed out. Even with the addition of the Monster Slayer specialty, the physical attack did not cause much damage to it. The wound on the large pyro slime soon stopped leaking pyro fluid. What an enviable self-healing ability, unique to the constitution of slimes. Amber faced off against the other large pyro slime, rapidly firing ordinary arrows one after another. Her arrows dealt more physical damage than Nolan's. This was probably related to her strength and high star bow. Chapter 70, Whopper Flowers. The automatic flipping catalyst book floated by Sucrose's side. She clapped her left hand to conjure a gust of an Mo element, and her right hand to summon another gust of an Mo element. Then, simultaneously, she clapped both hands together to create a huge gust of an Mo element, blowing away several small pyro slimes. "Don't come any closer!" Sucrose gently yelled, then used an elemental skill to summon ephemeral small Mo spirits up front. In an instant, all the slimes including the 2 large ones were gathered together in the middle. Seizing this chance, Nolan fired several consecutive arrows at the large pyro slime. Plop plop plop, orange-yellow pyro liquid oozed out. At the same time, under the Mo force, it finally couldn't resist and exploded. Adventure EXP plus 176. Looks like it was a bit tougher than the hydro slime encountered before. The remaining large pyro slime was also targeted by Amber, who seized the opportunity to shoot it with several arrows in a row, while Sucrose's and Mo elemental power broke through the small slimes. Phew, that should do it. Even though it was easily dealt with, Amber wiped her non-existent sweat with gloved hands. To think that the pyro slimes would be attracted here, it's really unexpected. The dropped slime condensate and slime secretions from their defeat were gathered together by Sucrose's and Mo power. Then very easily, without having to walk around, she collected them. Hearing Amber's words, Nolan didn't think it was that simple. It wasn't some extraordinary intuition but rather a familiar feeling. After all, he had brushed past many blossoms of revelation in the original game, and they usually attracted more than just a few monsters. But it was also possible that there were slight differences between reality and the game. Nolan thought so, but he didn't let down his guard. Sure enough, a few seconds later, the ground trembled slightly. Amber also noticed the anomaly, her fair face becoming serious again. Sucrose was a bit nervous. They gathered close, facing different directions in a triangle formation. Just then, something burst out from under the ground at both ends of Nolan's side. Crimson huge petals drooped and swayed from the top of the monsters' heads. The petal tips ignited bright yellow flames. These were floral mimic monsters, the Whopper flowers. The crimson body meant it could absorb pyro elements as nutrients, a pyro Whopper flower. Hey! Watching everyone being surrounded by Whopper flowers, Sucrose stepped back slightly, feeling a bit nervous. She then accidentally bumped into the shoulders of the 2 behind her. Amber spread her legs a bit in her over-knee-high boots, lowering her center of gravity. Pyro energy gathered on the arrows knocked on her Favonius warbow. Although the pyro Whopper flower had high pyro resistance, it didn't reach the immunity level of elemental life forms. Just as she was about to release the arrows, 2 Whopper flowers simultaneously burrowed underground. Amber's eyes widened slightly. As a scout, she had rich experience in dealing with monsters. "Everyone, move away quickly." Amber kicked off the ground like a little rabbit, flipping in mid-air. Then, she landed a bit further away, her body sinking slightly, effortlessly absorbing the impact of the landing. Nolan also realized the intentions of the Whopper flowers and directly hugged the slower Sucrose, jumping away from the spot. "Ah, please be careful, ah." Sucrose also had quite some adventure experience, but her movements were not as swift and agile in the end. Even though she understood Amber's intent, she was still a beat slower. The slight shaking under the ground had already traveled up through their feet. It was already too late to exert strength now. Just as she worried she would be knocked over, she suddenly felt a strong arm wrapped around her waist from behind, with a hand pressing against her right ribs, even causing a slight ticklish through her clothes. Sucrose couldn't help but tighten her hands inwards. After closing her eyes, she felt her feet leave the ground. In less than a second, Nolan had brought Sucrose away from their original position. The two floral mimic monsters, Pyro Whopper flowers, violently burst out together from below. The two had narrowly avoided being smashed away. He lightly landed at a distance, about to put down the girl he was hugging. But he realized his palm was still being clamped by Sucrose's arms. The soft, smooth texture of her clothes rubbed against the front and back of his hand. "Miss Sucrose, please relax a bit." Nolan turned his face slightly. A few strands of her cyan green hair brushed past his chin as he reminded her. "Ah, sorry. I'm a bit ticklish." Sucrose finally seemed to react, twitching her ears like an animal embarrassedly, then letting go of Nolan's hand. "Sucrose has developed good feelings towards you, obtained 120 affection points. Current affection level, LV.3, 30/300. Her good feelings towards Nolan, who saved her from harm, grew a bit more. "Please leave the rest to me." Sucrose looked towards the two Pyro Whopper flowers that emerged from the original spot. At the tips of their drooping petals, they were gathering pyro energy, seeming to prepare to attack. "Forbidden creation, Type 2. She threw out a transparent flask containing an unstable large wind spirit. As it shattered upon hitting the ground, the turquoise-colored large elemental being instantly appeared. It had a rhombus-shaped elemental core in the middle, with elf-like wings on either side. As it flapped its wings, the surrounding Anmo energy violently erupted. The two Whopper flowers were swept up in it like debris in a typhoon, flying about uncontrollably. Amber didn't miss this chance, firing an arrow infused with gathered pyro energy. Upon hitting the Whopper flowers, the pyro elemental energy dispersed due to the Anmo elemental energy, causing the entire unstable wind spirit to turn flaming red. In this way, it dealt both Anmo and pyro damage to the Pyro Whopper flower. Nolan wasn't idle either. His armor-piercing arrows flew as quick as teleportation, accurately striking the chaotically flying Whopper flowers. Their ultra-high tracking was completely unaffected by the turbulent winds. As these two Whopper flower monsters were quite strong, with high physical resistance, it took 9 of his arrows assisting the others to finally defeat them. Adventure EXP plus 435. Adventure EXP plus 415. At this moment, the brief duration of the large wind spirit came to an end, dissipating into the air as Anmo elemental energy. The two defeated Pyro Whopper flowers dropped to the ground. Nolan, Sucrose, and Amber approached. Amber placed her hands on top of the red boot cuffs that dug into her snow-white thighs right above her overknee boots. After bending down to confirm the Whopper flowers were dead, she finally breathed a sigh of relief. "It's all good now. Quick, check the quality of the nectar on them. It should be great research material for you, right, Sucrose?" Nolan said, looking at Sucrose beside him. That's right." Perhaps because the two had become somewhat familiar as friends, Sucrose's tone became more natural when she spoke. She stared at the bodies of the mimic plant monsters and, after a moment of contemplation, continued. "The petals of Pyro Whopper flowers also contain traces of pyro elements. We can perhaps use them to replace pyro flower stamens, taking their place to make elemental potions, millimeter." After finishing, Sucrose propped her chin, lightly nodding as if confirming her statement made sense. Chapter 71, Purple Experience Book? "Oh? That means we don't have to go looking for the flame flower." Nolan's face showed a surprised expression. "You could say that. I'm confident about this." Sucrose nodded slightly as she replied. "That's great then. In that case, going forward we just need berries and then we can head back." "Oh right, and the electro crystals for the electro potion," Nolan said, sounding pleasantly surprised. Sucrose pushed up her round half-frame glasses. Her fair face revealed a smile as she gave a definite nod. "Look, the ley line blossom emerged." Amber patted Nolan's shoulder with her left hand, then pointed to where the ley line overflow was earlier with her right hand. A bud of green flower bud emerged from below the ground. The three approached, looking at it with some curiosity. Nolan felt its appearance looked just like a normal plant rhizome that had sprouted a bud directly. Aside from emerging from underground, there didn't seem anything too unique about it. Let's make it bloom, and see how much ley line energy it releases. Each Blossoms of Revelation released varying amounts of energy, some more, some less. It was uncertain. The hair ties on Amber's bunny ears swayed slightly as she took out a crescent-shaped chunk of original resin to touch the ley line blossom. Original resin was a crescent crystal brimming with energy, able to unblock ley lines and allow ley line blossoms connected to them to smoothly refine and release the energy within. Nolan was a bit curious, watching her actions. Please wait. Seeing Amber's actions, Sucrose called out anxiously. What's wrong? Amber turned back to look at Sucrose, puzzled. Well, I want a few tissue fragments from the Blossoms of Revelation. Seeing that Amber hadn't touched the original resin to the Blossoms of Revelation yet, she breathed a sigh of relief and explained. Ah, I see. Amber nodded her head up and down, as Sucrose seemed to have mentioned this to her earlier but almost forgot. Sucrose faced them and pushed up her glasses, saying, Mr. Adventurer, please help cut off a leaf from the ley line blossom. You don't need much, a small piece will do. No problem, that's easy. Nolan smiled and said. Nolan took out his dull blade. Stepping forward slightly, he held a leaf of the ley line blossom in one hand and swung the blade down with the other. Rib. A thick green leaf was cut off. The dull blade wasn't truly edgeless, dull. Cutting off a leaf was very easy. A drop of green sap flowed from the cut on the leaf piece and the Blossoms of Revelation, then dissipated into some kind of energy before it even hit the ground, which was quite mystical. After handing the thick leaf to Sucrose to store away, Amber placed the original resin onto the ley line blossom on the other side. Visibly absorbed in, the bud then bloomed, releasing clusters of purple energy that could strengthen the body and increase one's strength. Just like the purple adventure books from the game. Come closer, everyone. The three squeezed together slightly. The purple energy clusters collided with them, making their bodies feel lighter. The process was brief, so quick they barely noticed the ley line blossom dissipating. Yet everyone's strength had definitively grown stronger. Nolan looked at his level, which had increased from level 20 to a little over 21. LV.21, 322/2100. The Blossoms of Revelation they encountered this time brought out a magical energy equivalent to over 2,300 Adventure EXP. It felt pretty good. Moreover, this was split among 3 people. If one person monopolized it all, it would be at least around 7,000. Comparable to defeating over a dozen ruin guards he had beaten before. If they encounter this a few more times, wouldn't their strength keep skyrocketing? Though that's the case, in reality, there's no game map in Teyvat. Where ley line overflows would appear was completely unpredictable. Even coming across one was not necessarily good luck, since it would attract many monsters after all. How are you two feeling? Nolan looked at Amber and Sucrose and asked. He was a bit curious about their strength actually. Hehe, very good. I feel I'm close to my second ascension. Amber placed her hands on the black silk waistcloth that could reveal the color of her skin. She smiled slightly, revealing pearly white teeth, and replied. Close to a second ascension? Then converted to levels, Amber was probably around 38 or 39. After all, level 40 was the second ascension. For the Soul Reconnaissance, Scout, Knight of the Knights of Favonius, the Pyro Vision Holder, to have this strength was not odd. As for me, I barely managed my first ascension not long ago. Right now I don't feel anything much. Sucrose's fair face flushed slightly. She clasped her hands behind her back and replied somewhat embarrassedly. Oh? So around the same as him? Nolan was not too surprised by this. Although their levels were similar, if they really had to compete, he could probably overwhelm Sucrose relatively easily. After all, Sucrose only occasionally went out to gather materials and used her vision in combat. She lacked some combat awareness. Dealing with not-so-smart monsters is fine. But if it were Nolan, Sucrose might not have the chance to use elemental skills or elemental bursts. As for Amber, he was a bit uncertain. After all, her combat experience is rich, and her overall strength is much higher than his, but it's highly unlikely that she'd be at a disadvantage. Nolan's mastery of archery at max level is enough for him to ignore some level differences. That's right, you mentioned looking for berries and electro crystals earlier, right? Having resolved the ley line energy overflow issue and completed her task for now, Amber smiled and asked leisurely. Indeed, right now Sucrose had already collected the 2-star shimmering nectar from the pyro whopper flowers, and similarly, the whopper flower petals to replace pyro flower stamens. Next would of course be looking for berries and electro crystals. That's right. Could Miss Amber happen to know where some are? Sucrose nodded slightly and looked at her puzzledly. Amber crossed her arms and chuckled. Hee, I'm an outrider. The entirety of Mondstadt is my patrol area. Finding out where specialties or ores are is nothing unusual, right? That makes sense. Nolan nodded gently. Indeed, as she said, in terms of familiarity with the geographical environment of Mondstadt, probably no one knows it better than her. Let's go. I'll bring you to find berries first. Amber lowered her crossed arms and led the two to gather the materials they needed. Her legs stepped lightly in the white overknee boots. The swaying tips of her deep brown long hair trailing down her back gently caressed the snowy white thighs revealed under her hot pants. I wondered if the skin on Amber's thighs would feel ticklish. Nolan and Sucrose followed her footsteps. While Sucrose's eyes carried a thoughtful expression, probably already thinking about how to research the blossoms of revelation. Chapter 72, Material Collection completed. Stormbearer Mountains, Northern Region. In the vast grasslands, a small cluster of deep green bushes stood quietly. A brownish-red wild boar stuck its head inside, searching for food. It didn't find any tasty mushrooms, but discovered a small tree growing plump, translucent light red berries instead. The wild boar's eyes lit up. It had eaten this kind of berry before, and still remembered fondly their blossoming, floral sweetness that filled its mouth. Just as it wanted to take a bite. Suddenly, the boar's ears picked up the sound of multiple continuous footsteps trampling on the grass. In the wild boar's shallow memories flashed some unpleasant images. On an evening bathed in sunset glow, it and its companions had gone out together to forage and play. It should have been a carefree, worry-free day as usual. Until footsteps sounded just like the ones now, and appearing with them were two-legged monsters with strange tree branches in their hands. Using the strange tree branches, the two-legged monsters could shoot sharp wooden spears very far. Its companions had been pierced one by those wooden spears, falling dead to the ground before being dragged away by the two-legged monsters. Thinking of this, the wild boar fearfully pulled its head out from the bushes, looking left and right but not spotting any two-legged monsters. But never mind that, it had to run first. Being able to survive until now without being dragged away was thanks to how fast it could run. The brownish-red wild boar randomly picked a direction and charged ahead like a cavalry charge, crashing through recklessly. Then, after just a few seconds, it only felt its head hurt before its consciousness sank into darkness. Adventure EXP plus 25. Oh geez, what's up with this wild boar, it really had to charge over hey. Nolan thought in annoyance, looking at the wild boar he had just knocked out with a punch. They had been walking along normally, harboring no ill intentions towards it, and had been dozens of meters away, yet it still charged over for no reason. In front of these two girls, if I really let it hit me, how could I keep any of my dignity? Nolan, I can't believe you are actually getting annoyed at a wild boar, how unexpected, his friend Amber lightly laughed and joked. So the Mr. Adventurer's name is Nolan? What a not-so-styled name. Sucrose thought to herself, pushing up the circular half-frame glasses that had slid down to the tip of her nose. It's not like that, getting charged by it would really hurt after all, Nolan said sentimentally. When facing creatures like wild boars, I believe that even gods can't be careless. Ah, is it really that exaggerated? While confirming the location from her memory, Amber chatted casually with Nolan, then her gaze suddenly fixed. I found some berries, but it seems like they've been dug up by a wild boar. Don't tell me that guy already ate all the berries, Nolan stroked his cheek in thought and said, Amber, how about getting the iron pot out, we'll give it a hot water bath right here. That's a good idea. Amber pushed aside the bushes to discover the sweet berry tree was still fine and standing, with no less of the light red berries. It seemed that the wild boar had discovered them but hadn't had a chance to eat them yet. Consider it lucky, they couldn't be bothered to give it a bath now. The wild boar, lying unconscious on the ground, had no idea it had narrowly escaped a calamity. Sucrose, shall we uproot the whole plant next? Amber turned back to the green-haired girl wearing glasses behind her. Ah yes, please leave this kind of thing to me. Because the digging process needs to avoid damaging the roots, it will require some time. Sucrose nodded lightly, then took out the small iron shovel she had prepared beforehand. She came to the small berry bush and crouched down slightly. The light black over-the-knee stockings she wore wrapping her legs folded a little at the knees, with barely noticeable wrinkles. Her buttocks rested on the heels of her white short boots, the leather straps on the side of her legs pressed against her snow-white, soft skin, slightly tugging at the elastic bands of her socks, perfectly preventing any chance of slipping. Sucrose gently used the iron shovel to turn over the soil beneath the berry bush, gradually exposing its root system. After a long time, under Sucrose's careful digging, the berry tree finally left the ground completely undamaged. Amber raised her hand and stretched lazily, yawning, "Sucrose, watching your slow movements is making me sleepy. This is to ensure the experiment goes smoothly. It's necessary to guarantee its excellent health." Sucrose put away the iron shovel and the whole intact berry tree into her vision. After harvesting the first berry tree, next, relying on her outstanding memory, Amber recalled the locations where she had encountered berry trees during her regular patrols. Then, she brought Nolan and Sucrose to harvest 3 more. As for the electro crystal, although they didn't miss those either, based on what Amber knew, there was only one location. That kind of ore that crackled with electric sparks needed to be broken with pyro attacks to safely collect. If one were to approach them directly, they would be shocked all over. Fortunately, they encountered Amber as soon as they arrived at Stormbearer Mountains, or else collecting all the materials wouldn't have been so quick. Even so, after finding the location of the last electro crystal mine and harvesting 4 pieces of electro crystals, it was already noon. Amber's task of dealing with the ley line disorder, along with Nolan and Sucrose's main goals were all accomplished, so with nothing else to do the group began to head back together. Returning from Stormbearer Mountains to Mondstadt City took quite some time too. Originally, Nolan wanted to invite the 2 of them to have lunch together, but Amber had to go back to the Knights of Favonius to report to the acting Grand Master. And Sucrose, having obtained not only the Lawachurl's bone mask but also the rare blossoms of revelation today, was already eagerly wanting to begin her bioalchemy research. She also seemed distracted, immersed in her own world. Well, nothing could be done about that, he'd have to find another chance next time. Amber left first, and Nolan and Sucrose arrived at the crafting bench. Although Sucrose wanted to immediately return to her lab to research those novel items, she had promised Nolan to craft elemental potions first. After all, things had to be done one step at a time. "Oh? You're back so soon, did you collect all the materials already?" Timaeus asked in surprise when he saw them at the crafting bench. It's thanks to Amber, otherwise it wouldn't have gone so smoothly." Sucrose nodded lightly, then pushed up her circular half-frame glasses that had slid down. "I see, so it was that scouting night miss." Timaeus nodded, then continued, "That's right, Miss Sucrose is here to craft those elemental potions now, please let me observe." "Of course, that's no problem Timaeus," Sucrose answered with a smile. There were many ways for alchemists to grow, and observing others' experiments was necessary too. Chapter 73, Enhanced Version of the Pyro Elemental Potion. At the crafting table near the fountain square in Mondstadt, Sucrose laid out all the materials needed for the 2 types of elemental potions. 3 blossoms of revelation petals, 4 purple electro crystal chunks, 1 magic crystal chunk, a small portion of luminescent spine, and a lizard tail. "Timaeus, could you please boil these flower petals into a thick liquid?" Following the recipe for the pyro elemental potion, the first step was to boil the stamen of the blossoms of revelation petals into a thick liquid. Sucrose had carefully compared and found that the properties of blossoms of revelation were similar, so the same method could be used. "Of course, leave it to me." Timaeus patted his chest to indicate no problem. Although his alchemical skills weren't as good as Sucrose's, he was very proficient at simple preparatory work with materials. Stewing flower petals into a viscous juice seemed simple, even ordinary people without any alchemical knowledge could do it. But just like how on the bustling streets of Mondstadt, vendors sell sausages and everyone thinks it's easy to operate, but when they try it at home, they might end up failing. No matter how simple the task, the difference in skill between an expert and a novice was stark. After all, while the blossoms of revelation petals weren't particularly rare or valuable, when needed, it could be quite a hassle to find them. This was also why Sucrose didn't ask Nolan to do this work, in case he messed up and they had to collect materials again. Timaeus took the materials and went to the side to start preparing. Sucrose then looked at the electro crystal and magic crystal chunk. The electro crystal needed to be smelted into liquid with intense heat, while the magic crystal chunk had to be made into a fine powder. Sucrose twitched her ears, pondered for a moment, then looked over Nolan through her lenses. She then shyly averted her gaze slightly to the ground. With the side of her fair face towards Nolan, it showed her delicate and exquisite jawline. Due to her nature, she said somewhat awkwardly. Mr. Nolan, could you please help grind the magic crystal chunk into powder? Sure. Nolan hadn't expected there to be something for him to do, but he was happy to participate. The open-air alchemy shed where the crafting table was located had grinding tools. Nolan only needed to put the magic crystal chunk into the mortar, then slowly push the pestle around. The magic crystal chunk inside would naturally turn into powder over time. As for smelting the electro crystal into liquid, that task was naturally Sucrose's. Putting 2 electro crystal chunks into the burning furnace, then guiding Anmo to continuously diffuse, this way, the efficiency would clearly be higher. The 2 remaining electro crystal chunks were left for Sucrose to continue the previous experiment on the effects of electro on the growth of sunset TIAs. Since preparing these materials was quite time-consuming, by the time everything was ready, over an hour had passed. On the table in front of Sucrose were 3 glass flasks. One held red viscous liquid, one had blue powder. The last one contained a purple, water-like liquid, that flickered with traces of electricity if observed closely. Phew! Sucrose, wearing white gloves, clenched her hands to psych herself up. Timaeus and Nolan watched intently, one wanting to learn from the experience, the other simply curious. According to my estimates, these materials should be enough to make around 5 bottles each of Pyro Potion and Electro Potion. As Sucrose spoke, she also took out new glass test tubes. She thought for a bit, then first picked up the flask containing the red viscous liquid. Bringing the flask mouth to the opening of a test tube, she slowly poured it in. The red viscous liquid flowed down along the transparent glass wall to the bottom of the test tube, then slowly rose from the bottom. Sucrose looked at it levelly. When it reached the 10 cm mark etched on the test tube, she precisely stopped pouring. Very good. Next is adding the magic crystal powder to activate it. This part will be a bit dangerous. The luminescent spine stabilizer must be added within 3 seconds, otherwise, it will explode. The afternoon sunshine coming in through the edges of the shed shone obliquely on Sucrose's legs wrapped in over-the-knee stockings, bathing them in brilliant radiance from right to left. A slender shadow stretched across the ground. Sucrose, concentrated on crafting the elemental potion, spoke without any of the shyness or embarrassment present during normal conversation. Although she mentioned the danger, based on her experience from hundreds, if not thousands, of more difficult alchemical experiments, there was no possibility of accidents in preparing simple elemental potions. As soon as the blue magic crystal powder entered the test tube, the red viscous liquid instantly started boiling like hot water, turning towards a fiery color. At this time, the prepared luminescent spine was immediately added, stopping the boiling, but the entire test tube changed from red to a blazing crimson. Success! Through the lenses of her round half-frame glasses, besides being able to catch a glimpse of her fair skin, the most captivating were her eyes filled with joy. So you're saying this test tube has become a bomb that will release massive pyro damage when thrown? Nolan asked curiously. That's right. It can be totally used as an impact-triggered fire bomb. Sucrose pushed up her glasses that had slid down a little and nodded with a smile. Miss Sucrose, watching for so long, I do have a question. Usually, once crystal ore is eroded by ley line energy and turns into magic crystal, it becomes very difficult to utilize. This potion recipe doesn't look that complicated either. How can the magic crystal powder be used? Timaeus scratched his head, completely puzzled by this. I had the same doubt initially, but obtained the answer during the process of crafting the potion just now. Sucrose's index finger touched her chin as she thought for a bit before continuing. Actually, when the magic crystal powder was added to the liquid containing dormant pyro elements, no reaction occurred with it. That is to say, the magic crystal itself wasn't utilized. It just stimulated the pyro elements in the liquid with the ley line erosion energy it contained, allowing the pyro elements to become active. If something else with the same effect is found, it can be substituted. But the specific dosages and ratios would need to be calculated through multiple experiments. Timaeus, also an alchemist, easily understood Sucrose's meaning in her words. And Nolan, having studied high school chemistry, although he had mostly forgotten it by now, the basic chemical literacy he had developed wouldn't disappear. So he also understood the gist of it. T/N, but I don't. I hate chemistry. Right, because the main ingredient was changed from flaming flower nectar to blazing blossom petals, its power has increased tremendously too. For this slightly improved pyro potion, to maintain experimental rigor, it shouldn't continue using its previous name. Improved, compared to the original name, how about calling it Enhanced Pyro Potion, Formula Number 2? To come up with a name, Sucrose engaged in deep thought. Just then, as Nolan was feeling somewhat amused, the status panel suddenly popped up a prompt. Comprehended the potion formula Enhanced Pyro Potion, Formula Number 2. Chapter 74, Swordsmanship Improvement. Upon hearing the prompt from the character panel, Nolan first felt a sense of joy, then pondered for a moment. He suddenly felt that learning how to craft this Enhanced Pyro Potion, Formula Number 2 wasn't of much use. After all, with just one recipe, the scope was too small and completely unnecessary to spend Adventure EXP to upgrade. No matter how high the level, it would still be limited to this one recipe, making the cost-effectiveness too low. It was far less practical compared to other skills. If he had learned crafting elemental potions or directly alchemy, it would have been perfect. But alchemy was actually a very broad category. Similar to modern science, it contains many different branches like chemistry, biology, physics, and so on. It was impossible to completely grasp it just by learning one potion recipe. It was like learning to ride a bicycle, no matter how high the level, even reaching the stage of condensing extraordinary traits. The most that could be gained would be traits like speed increase or reduced stamina consumption. It's inconceivable that a high level in riding a bicycle would automatically give you knowledge of riding a horse or driving a car. Although they all fall under the category of using transportation, they are fundamentally different in operation. So, just by mastering one elemental potion recipe, Nolan couldn't comprehensively master alchemy. Even raising it to max level would probably only result in characteristics like efficient material usage or mass production. To master alchemy, besides acquiring a vast amount of knowledge, the most important thing is the basic alchemical formula. Nolan learned this from the background of game characters. For example, Albedo, chief alchemist of the Knights of Favonius, had the art of chemia passed down from his master Reindotir. This is completely different from ordinary alchemical formulas and is a special technique originating from the ancient nation of Kenria. Sucrose's elemental skill also combined alchemical formulas with Inmo to summon small wind spirits to assist in battle. Without alchemical formulas, no matter how much knowledge one grasped, they could only be called a profoundly learned scholar. They could not wield alchemy to leverage knowledge to change reality. Conversely, only mastering alchemical formulas without the corresponding knowledge as a foundation would also make it difficult to achieve anything. Alchemists must absorb knowledge on the path to seeking the truth of the world to grow stronger. The more you understand, the more you can do with alchemical formulas. If Nolan wanted to become a grandmaster in the alchemy field, the pressure on Adventure EXP would be unimaginable. Moreover, for complex knowledge-based skills, whether he can even get started is a question for this academic underachiever. Of course, he could also find an opportunity later to ask Sucrose to teach him some fundamental alchemical formulas. Although wanting to become strong in this field is cumbersome and consumes Adventure EXP, and significant growth cannot be achieved in a short time, satisfying his curiosity and expanding his mindset is still necessary. While Nolan's thoughts wandered, Sucrose continued crafting the number 2, 3, 4, and 5 enhanced pyro potions, formula number 2. The materials for the pyro potions were used up just like that, without a drop left. 5 bottles of electro potion were crafted using the same method. Although not much, their power could not be underestimated. Most importantly, combining the 2 potions would cause additional overload reaction damage. If there was a large quantity, he might have been able to fight the Lawachurl back in the secret realm. Mr. Nolan, the elemental potions you need are ready. Sucrose's fair face showed a relaxed smile, then she said shyly. In the future, during adventures, could you help pay attention to monster bones? It would be best if they were fresher. I will continue to help you make elemental potions as compensation. Sure, I'll remember. And elemental materials like flaming flowers, pyro flowers, so we don't have to gather materials again next time we make potions. Nolan nodded with a smile, accepting Sucrose's long-term commission. Right, Sucrose, if I wanted to learn fundamental alchemical formulas, what would be the requirements? Nolan considered and asked. You want to learn formulas? Sucrose was somewhat surprised but also expected it. After all, most people would be curious about the mysterious art of alchemy. So, she pushed her round half-frame glasses and said, "Mr. Nolan, if you want to learn, feel free to come to the Knights of Favonius Alchemy Laboratory to find me. Alchemy is too profound, and it can't be explained in a short time. Next time, I'll bring some fresh monster bones over to consult you." Nolan carefully put away the total of 10 tubes of elemental potions, to avoid accidentally smashing and detonating them. Sucrose must be eager to start researching the newly harvested materials now. Nolan also realized that he shouldn't continue to disturb her. Apart from bones, rare things like ley lines flowers work too. The dark elastic band of the thigh-high stockings slightly tightened Sucrose's snow-white legs, accentuating a subtle and soft fleshiness. She lowered her gaze to the side and said somewhat shyly, "Sucrose has developed good feelings towards you, obtained 150 affection points. Current affection level, LV3, 180/300. No problem." Nolan waved and left the alchemy crafting shed. He had made plans with Fiscal and Bennett to explore the secret realm again tomorrow. After the consumption from this morning, his arrow reserves were running low again. Of the fire-infused arrows from last time, only one was left when they returned from the secret realm. The armor-piercing arrows were down to 30. Many more had been used up during material collecting this morning, since they were facing the pyro slimes that were elemental life forms. With erosion from the pyro element, even arrows made of iron were difficult to reuse. So it was time to head to Wagner the blacksmith's shop to resupply. Nolan sighed softly, it looked like another heavy expense. He currently had 320,000 mora on hand. Purchasing arrows would take at least a third. Fire-infused arrows were truly expensive, and armor-piercing arrows weren't cheap either. Buying ordinary iron-headed was affordable, but they weren't very effective against monsters. Unless it was vision wielders who could control elements like Amber and Fiscal. They used cheap, ordinary iron-headed arrows. But when focused, gathering elemental power, the might of arrows they shot out was stronger than specially crafted fire-infused arrows by 30%. This was a gap ordinary people had difficulty crossing. As expected, it was still best to improve his sword techniques. No matter what, a dull blade would be much more durable than arrows. Thinking of this, Nolan glanced at his status panel. Adventure EXP, 2845. 2,800 experience points were enough to raise his swordsmanship to a certain level. Of course, the first thing to improve would be the Favonius swordsmanship, royal that he learned from Eula. It was a two-handed swordsmanship, but it could also be performed with a single-handed sword. Its advantage was in utilizing the full body's strength, with every part of the body coordinating perfectly. It also looked elegant and visually appealing when used by girls. When used by guys, it was naturally crisp and efficient at killing enemies. As Nolan walked towards Wagner's blacksmith shop, he invested his Adventure EXP into the swordsmanship level. Chapter 75, Enhancing the Dull Blade. Adventure EXP, -2798. Favonius Swordsmanship, Royal LV.1, 2/100. Favonius Swordsmanship, Royal LV.8, 0/800. The swordsmanship learned from Eula suddenly became a skill second only to Favonius Hunter's archery in terms of level. Nolan's swordsmanship felt like it had undergone countless trials, with various related techniques and knowledge appearing in his mind, becoming part of his memory, and even his body's instinct. As Nolan subtly comprehended and digested the sword art, the short journey from the crafting bench to Wagner's smithy had already ended. Inside the blacksmith shop, Wagner was not forging weapons or anything else, he was sitting on a chair with his back against it, his gaze slightly tilted towards the ceiling, as if he was tired and taking a break. The apprentice blacksmith, Schultz, was still tending to the furnace. "Yo, Mr. Wagner, it's been a few days, can't do without me." Nolan joked as he greeted him. Wagner's gaze slanted down, glanced at the visitor, then turned back and said, "So it's you, boy. Even though I can forge iron, I can't turn my body into iron. People need rest." "Hehe, is this the experience Mr. Wagner summarized from working?" "Indeed, it makes sense," Nolan complimented with a smile. How about it? Are those fire-quenched arrows working well?" Wagner sat up properly from his reclining posture and looked at Nolan as he asked. "I can only say that, as expected of Mondstadt's renowned master blacksmith, Mr. Wagner's fire-quenched arrows have helped me a lot in adventures. As you can see, I've come to stock up again. Nolan spread his hands, displaying a helpless expression as if adventures would fail without those arrows. Although he had decent swordsmanship now, it was still necessary to have some arrow reserves, as the ability for ranged attacks should not be lacking. It could be said that in situations where a long sword could be used, fewer arrows would be used. After all, each fire-imbued arrow shot out was a round and shiny mora. Ha ha ha, just for that boy, I'm willing to give you a 100 mora discount per fire-quenched arrow. Mr. Wagner laughed loudly twice, then regretfully said. But unfortunately, the fire-quenched arrows are sold out. And no adventurer seems to have completed the blacksmith shop commission at adventurers' guilds for pyro ore either. So, you talk big but can't back it up, hey? Nolan looked at him slightly speechless. Since that's the case, then there's no choice. Give me 30 armor-piercing arrows then. Do these get a 100 mora discount each too? Nolan sighed, then said smilingly. You brat, thinking real nice there. Wagner glanced at Nolan, then instructed Schultz by the furnace, go bring him 30 armor-piercing arrows. Armor-piercing arrows cost 600 mora each. With a 100 mora discount, his profit would be completely gone, not even covering labor costs. Yes, Master Wagner. Schultz nodded in understanding. Mn. While waiting, Wagner thought for a moment and said to Nolan again. By the way, young adventurer brat, I've just forged a batch of enhancement ore for enhancing weapons. Want to buy some and try? Enhancing weapons? Nolan pondered slightly. Enhancing weapons in hand could lead to obvious personal strength improvements, it just cost a bit, since the enhancement ore required mora to buy, and mora was also needed as a medium when enhancing weapons. How much are you selling them for? Nolan asked. 400 for common ore, 2,000 for fine ore, and 10,000 for mystic ore. That's the market price, and I won't charge you a single extra mora, Wagner said, tapping his chest with his robust right arm. Then he continued. 3 pieces of mystic enhancement ore plus little over 2,000 mora can enhance your dull blade to its current limit. Wagner pointed to the single-handed sword hanging at Nolan's waist. All you need to do is find a few suitable ascension materials during your adventures, and you can perform the first ascension. By then, it will be much stronger than its current blank slate state. Alright, let's give it a try then. Nolan pulled out the dull blade from its wooden scabbard at his waist and handed it to Wagner, indicating he needed help enhancing it. After all, Nolan had no experience enhancing weapons, he didn't know how it differed from the game. Ha ha ha, you brat have never enhanced a weapon before, right? It's simple, I'll give you the mystic enhancement ore, you try it yourself. Wagner laughed twice, then directly took 3 newly forged pieces of mystic enhancement ore and passed them to Nolan. The ore looked like smooth pink crystals, cool to the touch but otherwise unremarkable. Place them on the sword, then add in mora, Wagner explained. Nolan followed the instructions, laying the dull blade flat on Wagner's forging table and arranging the 3 pink crystals over the even blade. But there was no reaction. He took out 2 1,000 mora coins and let them fall between the mystic enhancement ore and the dull blade. Something mystical happened. The mora emitted a golden glow, enveloping them before slowly fusing together. Still lacking a bit, not enough mora, add 5 more small ones. Wagner reminded. Got it. Nolan added 5 more 100 mora coins. The golden glow grew slightly stronger. Before long, a brand new blunt sword, enhanced to the brink of its first ascension, was completed. Holding it in his hand, Nolan found the scratches on the blade from hacking apart the rebel piles in the secret realm were gone, as if reforged anew. The dull blade was no longer the same as before, it was now a dull blade plus 20. What Wagner referred to as the first ascension was akin to enhancing a weapon to level 20 in the game. How is it? Not bad, right? Now it's much stronger than a non-enhanced 2-star weapon, Wagner said with a smile. Though, 3 mystic ore, 30,000 mora, isn't that almost enough to buy a 2-star one-handed sword? Nolan suddenly thought to say. The cheapest 2-star single-hand sword is 50,000 mora. Your current dull blade is stronger than a 2-star. Wagner said this as Schultz returned with the armor-piercing arrows. That makes sense. Although high-star weapons are strong, enhancing them also costs more. The dull blade is good enough for now. Nolan nodded lightly, then stored away the 30 piercing arrows and paid the full amount before leaving the smithy. Including the mora spent as medium during weapon enhancement, he had used over 51,000 this time. Since he didn't buy any fire-imbued arrows, it wasn't too heavy of an expense. When Nolan walked back to Valberry Street, he discovered the sky had already darkened, with the vague outline of stars visible. Thinking of hurrying back to put down and organize the many things on him, he turned into a dimly lit alley with tidy greenery on one side. Suddenly, he saw a pair of icy blue fluffy ears emerge from the green bushes. End of chapter.
Thanks for listening.